Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks, and today we have a special guest. It's Jamie Block.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be back. Feel like I get to talk a lot about this Lord of the Rings set, which is a joy.
Oh, my God. It's so cool. And today we are beginning our set review of Lord of the Rings. So between the Commander products and the set, there are over 100 legends? Is that what we counted?
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. It is certainly at least 90.
It is an ungodly amount of legends in this set, which means that we are certainly not going to cover all of the commanders and probably not even half of the commanders in this set. So this set review season, we're doing something a little bit different. We've picked out the ones that we think are going to be the most popular. We've really done we've broken them down into categories, the ones that we have the most to say about, and are going to deliver them in different ways. So today's episode, we are talking about the most powerful commanders in Lord of the Rings. These are they're just generically the best cards.
Yeah, they're great. Then there are a lot of powerful ones to choose from. This is certainly not to say these are the only 10 powerful ones.
Yeah.
A lot of it came down to sort of margin calls about, if this list got extended to 15, it would certainly not be difficult to find some more contenders in there. But these are the ones that we think really do put themselves in the position to be the most powerful in the Command Zone.
Yeah, in the Command Zone specifically. There are probably cards, legends in the set that are more powerful than these, but these are going to be your most powerful commanders. We are going to talk about 10 decks today, and we're going to talk about a lot of Magic cards. And you know who has a lot of Magic cards? It's cardkingdom.com/command. That is where we go to pick up all of our Magic singles and sealed product, especially when a new set that I'm excited about comes out, like Lord of the Rings. I can go to one place, I can order the sealed product I want, I can order all of the pre-orders or the singles that I want, and they're all going to show up in one safe, professional package.
It is indeed one site to ship them all.
Oh, no, we're going to have to make that ad. One site to ship them all. Card Kingdom is the best. They've got, I know that I can trust them to ship their cards safely and that they're going to show up in one safe package. And if something happens, they've got great customer service to handle any mishaps in the mail, any disasters where many cards have been vanquished. Again, you can support the show and pick up Magic cards by going to cardkingdom.com/command. You can also support the show by using our other affiliate link over at ultrapro.com/command. Once you have cards in your hand, hopefully from Card Kingdom, you need to protect them, keep them safe. They're made of paper. Put them in Ultra Pro sleeves and put those sleeves into deck boxes. Play on a play mat. Ultra Pro also has the official licensed Magic art, which for Lord of the Rings is a huge deal because there is tons of new art that has come out, which means tons of sick new playmats. That is a picture of Aragorn, but this is a foily, creepy Frodo mat, which is pretty sick. This is him coveting his jewelry. And all of that is available at ultrapro.com/command. If you're as excited about Lord of the Rings as I am, I know you're going to want the art to match. So go to ultrapro.com/command, keep your cards safe, and support the show. The other way to support us is directly at patreon.com/commandzone. Our patrons are truly the lifeblood of our whole operation. You guys make everything we do possible and better, and we thank you so much. But also you get some cool perks for being a patron. You get access to extra turns and game nights early. You get to watch turn talks, which is one of my favorite parts about extra turns. After we play the game, we sit down and we talk about the game that just happened. What would have happened if we had one more draw, one more turn? I shouldn't have done that, and then maybe it would have been better in hindsight. It's a conversation about the game you just watched, and it's a ton of fun. Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode, and this one is dedicated to Dakota Dillard. Thanks, Dakota. You rock. Dakota rocks. All right. Let's get into it. We got lots of sweet, powerful commanders to talk about today from the Lord of the Rings set. The caveat, of course, is power can be difficult to measure. We haven't seen any of these cards actually in the command zone yet. So this is based on just judgment of what similar commanders and what we know of commanders. And, there may be some commander that rises to take down Sauron. And I'm certainly excited to see what commanders become popular. And obviously, this is all just in anticipation of the set. But the 10 that we were talking about today have the brute strength. They have the lethal efficiency and the potential combo-iness of commanders that have been powerful in the past. So we expect these to see a lot of play. And I think predictably and appropriately, these are some of the more powerful characters in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, down to power level, they really made an effort to have the mechanics of the cards match the lore, and that means the characters who sort of are the strongest and do the coolest stuff in the books are the characters who are the strongest and do the coolest stuff at the commander table.
Yeah, you can really see the effort in the design on these to be flavorful and to make sure the bad guys do bad guy stuff and the good guys do good guy stuff, and they really stand for each character at a specific moment in the books. So we're going to talk about some cool cards, including this first one, the Kenrith of Lord of the Rings. It's Aragorn the Uniter. If you haven't seen him yet, Aragorn is a 4-mana legend. His price is red, green, white, blue. It's everything but black, of course. And he's a 5/5 human noble. It says whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. Whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So he kind of just does stuff.
Yeah, he is just incidental value for whatever it is that you want the deck to do. You have access to 4 colors, so there's kind of no limit to the kinds of decks that you could build around him if you want. Right. But certainly some are going to make better use of his abilities and turn them into a win con more than others. Yeah,
I think Aragorn's the kind of commander that if it's in the command zone, you're not really sure what's in the 99. It could be anything. And I wanted to make a point before we get into the decks that we're talking about. Aragorn cares about the color of spells. He doesn't care about the color identity of spells, which is a little different and a little confusing, especially for commander players. You can tell the card's spell color based on the frame, but more importantly, based on the pips in the casting cost. That's gonna tell you what the actual color is. It doesn't count any of the pips that are in the explainer text, which we would include for color identity. So this can get confusing with cards like Rogue Rock, Son of Roga. He costs 0, but he's a red card. How did I know that? It's because he has a little red circle to the left of his on the type line, and it indicates that Rogue Rock is a red card, despite not having any red in his casting costs. You can also see that in like the backsides of battles. They don't have specific casting costs, but you do cast them. So like Teferi Akosa of Zalfir is a white-blue spell when you defeat the invasion of Phyrexia. So when you flip it, you would get both the white ability and the blue ability of Aragorn. Little clarification. All right. So there's a couple ways that we could build this. There's infinite ways that we could build this.
Yeah.
But there's like some neat stuff you can do.
There's definitely some neat stuff. It definitely feels like some of those triggers on Aragorn are a little more compelling than others, though even what I would call some of the less compelling ones of them, you can turn into a compelling thing by pairing them with other cards.
Right. I think the first card that I thought of when I looked at this was Painter's Servant. And I was like, okay, if you have Painter's Servant in play, you can paint all of your spells whatever color you want to trigger on Aragorn the most. I would think red. But if you're building a token deck, maybe you paint them all white. Or if you're building like the elf scry thing, maybe you paint all your spells blue. Obviously you would put more blue cards in it, but it makes it a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, and I mean, this first card that you've pulled up to talk about regarding Painter's Servant, I think is a very fun, clever include that actually involves painting all your spells green.
It does. It's Willbreaker.
Wait, that's not green.
It's
what are we talking about?
Willbreaker is a 5-mana human wizard. It says, whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability you control, gain control of that creature for as long as you control Willbreaker.
And the great thing here is so Aragorn's green spell trigger, which gives a creature +4/+4. It doesn't care if it's your creature.
Yeah, you could be like, I'll give your dragon +4/+4. Give it to me. Give it to me. So every time you cast a Rampant Growth, you get to steal something. Obviously, your Willbreaker will get removed. But in the meantime, neat.
You have access to 4 colors of spells to try to protect it. So, all those spells will end up green. But
which is great. You can steal more spells. Or more creatures. I could also see painting all your spells red. I think that's the most aggressive build of this, obviously. And in that case, you'd want something like a Chandra's Incinerator in the deck, which is very powerful when you're dealing non-combat damage. It turns that non-combat damage to opponents' faces also to their creatures. So it turns that bolts into additional lightning bolts, flame flashes.
It really feels like just the red is the one that is the most clear win con.
Right.
Infinite tokens or a great many tokens even. You have red, so you could give them all haste, but it's a lot harder to pull off an immediate win con that way.
Right.
Infinite scry, you can reorder your whole deck. And even, many instances of scry too, you get a lot of selection. But red is really the one where it's like, oh, if I am bolting to the face every time I cast a spell, that can close a game out quite quickly.
Right. I could definitely see a multiple Aragorn builds that are built around each color ability, where you're like, I'm really focusing on one synergy over another. I could also see an Aragorn build where you just try to cast stuff that's all the colors, where every spell that you cast has as many colors as possible, and you try and trigger as many things on Aragorn.
Yeah, I mean, this really speaks to me. In an extra turns that we were in together, I have a multicolor matters deck that is exactly these 4 colors. And this just gives so much extra value off of every spell that you would want to cast in that deck. So just leaning into the multicolored matters theme with cards like Rien, Angel of Rebirth, which pumps your multicolored creatures and lets them come back to your hand when they die. General Ferrus Rockerick, one of, if not the best, whenever you cast a blank spell, make a token cards out there, which makes a 4/4 golem every time you cast a multicolored spell, in addition to the Aragorn triggers that you'll be getting. Right. There's just, there's so much value built into the multicolored matters theme that Aragorn just seamlessly can lead or fit right into.
Right. I think building around the just as many colors in your deck is really going to make the most use out of Aragorn and really make him sort of shine, in his coat of many colors. I guess he took it from Saruman. There's a lot of cards that we've talked about in the past that work in multicolored decks. Knight of New Alara buffs your multicolored creatures for all of their colors. Tome of the Guild Pack says when you cast a multicolored spell, you draw a card. I really like Falagi Wayfarer in this kind of deck, and it's partly because I've just seen really cool stuff with it. But it is 2 and a green, but it says on it that it is all colors. You can put it in this deck, right? Its color identity
I believe it
has
has reminder text that says this does not affect color identity.
Great. Just a good clarification for everybody. It also says multicolored spells you cast have Convoke, particularly good with Aragorn's white ability, which makes tokens.
Yeah, and even if they're summoning sick, Convoke does not care about that. So you can use those tokens right away. Just keep going spell into spell into spell.
We talked about it fairly recently. I think if you're building a multicolored deck, it's fun to build around the card Threefold Signal. This is a 3-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 3. Each spell you cast that's exactly 3 colors has Replicate 3. So it's a stoplight, and Aragorn always obeys traffic laws because he's a good man. But
that was my favorite chapter in the book.
It's where he stops at the traffic light and waits for it to turn green, and it never does, but he never moves, for he is wise. The Threefold Signal is just a cool card to build around, and there's a lot of really good 3-colored cards. They're easy to find on Scryfall. If you go to Scryfall and you search C equals 3, color equals 3. You'll find all of the cards that match the threefold signal stipulation. There's a lot of cool ones. You can find them. I believe in you guys. I think
you can do it.
Other way that you go is instead of focusing on multicolored matters, although maybe that's like more of a sub-theme, is you go full legendary matters. Because commanders have a lot of colors and will trigger this a lot.
Yeah, it's just kind of a reality now that for literally any commander that is 3 or more colors, unless it's really pushing you in a specific direction, which part of the beauty of this card is it's pretty open-ended how you want to do it, you can build a Legendary Matters deck around that theme. Every color has gotten Legendary Matters cards in it. Every color certainly has an abundance of legends, whether they care about the fact that they are legendary or not. And this just is a great way for your commander to give you value off of all those other legends you're casting, and just, I would say, have a great flavorful feel. Aragorn the Uniter feels like it's going to bring all these legends together.
Yeah, I really like this sort of creature-based strategy because it does feel more Aragorn. You get to sort of mix it with cool magic characters that we love, and it's like all the heroes coming together. Very Infinity War, as it has been lately. Captain Sisay is great in this deck. She searches up legends out of your deck. Reki, the history of Kamigawa, says whenever you cast a legendary spell, you draw a card, as does basically Joiro Weatherlight Captain, which draws off of historic spells. One that I think I would be excited to include in this deck is Bard class. I've never had it in play. It's a red and green class, which means it has multiple levels that you can pay for. But the first one is legendary creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then if you pay an additional red and a green, so you've invested 4 mana at this point, legendary spells you cast cost red-green less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay. So if you're doing a more like aggressive build and you're focusing more on like the Gruul legends, I think Bard class can save you a lot of mana and do some really cool stuff. Yeah. Plus you get to make Aragorn a bard.
That's fun. That's just plain fun. But yeah, we see a few instances of Gruul getting legendary matters, but it's like, we've seen a lot of sort of Mardu caring about it, where you have the red but not the green. We've seen Celestia care about it, or Bant care about it. But red and green being in the same legendary matters deck doesn't happen a ton. It happens, but not often.
Yeah, it's cool having all of these colors, and it means that you really get to play a lot of legends that you're excited about, which is why I love Dihada, because I just got to play a lot of legends I was excited about. The final, like, a multicolored version that I was thinking about for this deck is just some kind of catastrophic, chaotic storm deck, where you combine like things like Whirlwind of Thought and Jeskai Ascendancy, which trigger when you cast non-creature spells, and like Kaikar Wind's Fury, all of these multicolored, powerful spells with the big enchantments that cast a lot of instants and sorceries kind of crazy like, which would trigger Aragorn a whole lot. It feels like this weird fireworks show. Yeah,
Aragorn can really turn sort of a silly storm off that is not necessarily really presenting a lot of power or a way to win, when every single one of those spells you're casting is getting you 2, 3 of his abilities.
Right.
You can just kind of do silly stuff and then look down and realize, with the life totals in the board state, I'm probably going to win this game.
I can probably, I really like the idea of combining charms like Naya Charm with Arcane Bombardment, which is 4 red for an enchantment. It says, when you cast your first instant or sorcery spell this turn, exile an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard. Then copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana cost. So you cast a spell, it goes under the Arcane Bombardment, and you cast all the spells that you've cast previous, and you're casting them. So you trigger Aragorn, and for all their colors, you shoot more stuff. You gain a guy. This guy is +4, and you shoot Lightning Bolt as well. And you could do that with like Eye of the Storm is one of the more nuts versions of this, which does that for every player basically. But you could do it with something like a Mizzix's Mastery as well. If you like overload a whole bunch of charms, you're going to do a ton of damage and make a ton of creatures and scry a lot. It sounds like a bit of a headache to resolve.
It does, but yeah, it speaks to the fact that sort of the more just spells you can cast with Aragorn out, the better position you're putting yourself in to win the game, which brings up sort of the obvious question, what if I could cast an infinite number of spells?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this. It's very easy to cast a spell infinite times, particularly Dramatic Reversal.
Yeah, Dramatic Reversal, Isochron Scepter, plus, the mana rocks that you need. That alone is giving you infinite Scry 2, which is, I don't know the math, but I know that it's true. You can reorder your deck exactly how you want. I believe there's a judge ruling that says you don't have to prove that you know how to do it as long as you can do it quickly.
Which... You probably can't.
No.
You probably stack like the first 5. And like, that's good enough.
If this is your plan, just know the cards you need on top in order to win, and then win quickly.
Yeah, it's like a complicated doomsday. But more lethally, you could cast infinite red spells, which is something that red does very well. Because it has Dockside Extortionist. Mm-hmm. Dockside is going to be the easiest way to do this. You can cast Dockside infinite times with Temur Sabertooth or Baron Master Wizard, Meticulous Excavation, Gladstone Curio, and any other small creature. Capsize. It tends to go infinite. So you cast Dockside infinite times, you make infinite mana, and you also deal infinite lightning bolts to the face.
Yeah, you don't need a thing to do with the mana. The sheer fact that you have gone infinite with Dockside with Aragorn out, that's a lightning bolt to the face every time you do it.
Yep.
Infinite lightning bolts to the face is game winning.
Lethal. But you could also do this with other things. I like Grinning Ignis, honestly. I
love Grinning Ignis.
It's such a cool card.
Grinning Ignis is such a card that, honestly, before I was really even into Commander at all, just seeing that it existed felt like, ooh, I want to play with this. I want to break this card.
I got to figure out what to do.
That's easy to do.
It really is. A Grinning Ignis, for those who aren't familiar, is an elemental for 2 and a red. And he's a 2/2, but that doesn't matter. It says red, return Grinning Ignis to its owner's hand, add colorless red, activate only as a sorcery. So all you need is like the additional red mana to be able to bounce Grinning Ignis to its hand and recast Grinning Ignis without losing or gaining any mana. And you know who provides red? It's Beergy. Beergy doesn't care. She'll cast Grinning Ignis all day.
Runaway Steamkin doesn't care.
Yeah. Earthcraft, that'll do it.
Yeah.
You just have to tap the Grinning Ignis for red. All right. Super cool commander. It's going to be tough to see what people do with it. Like, I think some decks are going to be like flavorful Aragorn decks, where it's like I put all of the legends from Lord of the Rings in there, and some are going to be like Kenrith decks, where you're like, okay, we're dead. Great.
Yeah, it genuinely feels like it is one of the commanders I've seen that has the largest breadth of power levels that you can build it at.
Yeah.
Such that, I sit down at the table, someone else breaks out an Aragorn the Uniter deck. I genuinely have to ask, what kind of brew is this? A lot of the time, you can kind of assume a certain range of power level. Aragorn feels like we've described, you can go full infinite combo win con. You can go full silly jank.
Yep.
Which I think is great, but it definitely, have your rule 0 conversations when Aragorn comes down at the table.
Are you switching your deck to Aragorn?
No. And to be honest, I was not even sure if Aragorn goes in it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I
think he's so cool to build around.
Yeah.
But that deck is so built around having things in it that literally say draw a card. If any part of his abilities involved the actual drawing of cards, he'd be a snap include. I'll test him.
Yeah.
I'll test him.
Yeah.
You gotta test him.
Yeah, for sure. Because he does a lot. All right, the next one we are talking about is Éowyn, Fearless Knight. She'll be happy that she's following Aragorn. Mm-hmm. Éowyn is a human knight for 2, a red and a white. She's a 3/4 with haste. And it says, when Éowyn enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Remember, she's a 3/4. And then, legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. Okay.
That's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun, and it seems sick. But my first question is there stuff to remove? She can't remove 3/3s. They have to have 4 power or higher in order for Éowyn to exile this creature.
Yeah, and as Commander becomes more and more about low drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, unless you're playing green, where everything that costs 3 mana has 4 power now.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily going to see a ton of 4 power creatures at the table, but you are going to see a decent amount, at least, of 4 power commanders at the table, because commanders still tend to be big and splashy a lot of the time.
That was my question. I was looking at EDHREC, and I was like, how do I just figure out how many things that she could hit generally? And it's hard to look at the top creatures in Commander, because most of them are Eternal Witnesses and Sakura Tribuilders, and not necessarily things you want to remove. Mm-hmm. So I decided just to look at Commanders, and the Commanders tend to be all of the colors of the deck, so they're sort of the best thing to remove anyway in terms of Éowyn's evasion ability. So out of the top 100 commanders on EDHREC, 38 of them are often 4 power or more and can be removed by Éowyn. So what I meant by that is some commanders are base power 2, but they get counters or they get buffed by something else, or they tend to wear equipment. So I fudged it a little bit based on cards that I would expect for her to be able to remove.
Yeah, it can be tricky, things that have power and toughness equal to something, like the number of lands you control or the number of some other kind of card you control.
Yeah.
Some of it is best guesswork.
Yeah, and 38 of them are often 4 power or more. So it's not a huge percentage. 40% is obviously less than half, but it's still a sizable chunk. And that means that between 1 or 2 of the commanders at the table are going to naturally be able to be removed by Éowyn.
Yeah, most of the time, someone is going to sit at the table, look at your Éowyn, and think, well, that's coming after me. And they'll be right.
And they will be right. I wanted to see generally how close things are. Because a lot of the commanders are often 2 or 3 power. And it's 46 out of 100. So that's, total, that's most of the 100 commanders are 2 or 3, 2, 3, or 4 or more power. So they could be removed by Éowyn if they got a boost in some way. I wanted to see if that was is that even a viable option? If including things that buff other people's creatures. So
yeah,
it seems like with a little boost you can hit most commanders.
Yeah, the answer is kind of. If a card gives a little boost and is good enough to be at least kind of worth including anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Throw it in there.
Okay, so I look at Éowyn, and my first thing that I think of is, boy, do I want a blanket.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just
repeatable removal is always, always, always good, and having access to it from your command zone is even better.
Right. It's and they gain protection from each of that creature's colors. So that makes being able to blink Éowyn and have her enter the battlefield at instant speed means that you can get protection from board wipes, you can get protections from big lethal attacks, you can use that protection more defensively rather than just offensively.
Yeah, and just to clarify, a destroy board wipe, you're still losing your stuff.
Right, it would be a damage-based board wipe.
Yeah.
Okay, so Éowyn specifies that she gives protection to legendary creatures, so I would think this deck does have either a legendary sub-theme or a legendary primary theme. So I was like, all right, what legends do we want to blink?
Yeah, and I love a lot of these. We've got Lauren of the Third Path, which has just truly been just a commander staple.
I hope they
since being released.
It's so good. Lauren is a 2 and a white. When she enters the battlefield, she can destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, and then you can tap her, and you and target opponent each draw a card. It's removal, it's card draw, and it's a little bit of politics. She kind of does it all. Plus, she's great to blink.
Yeah, I really like seeing Bruce Tarl on this list.
I like him.
Bruce Tarl, 4 mana total, 2 and Boros for a 3/3 legendary human ally. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, target creature you control gets double strike and lifelink until end of turn. That's great. You're an aggro deck regardless.
Yeah.
Just the recurring double strike and lifelink pads your life total. You're making enemies with this deck.
For sure. You have removal in the command zone and basically can make your creatures unblockable. You have to have a little bit of lifelink, and you have to really boost that aggro strategy. And Bruce, I think, is underrated and also can provide both of those things without eating a removal spell immediately. I also like that it's an attack trigger, which Éowyn helps. Helps those attack triggers get through.
Yeah, you're getting through, you're gaining that life. It just matters. And you're dealing a lot of damage.
One of my favorite legendary blink targets is Pia and Kieran Nalar, which is 2 red. They enter and they make 2 Thopters, and then you can sack artifacts and deal damage. And this card looks innocuous. It doesn't look super powerful, but as soon as you have 2 Thopters on your battlefield, you can block anything, and you have basically free attacks all the time. I always feel good when I have a Pia and Kieran, and I think in a blink deck, it's even more powerful. This is also a cool spot for Archangel Avacyn.
Yeah, you don't get to do that a ton.
Yeah, I've never put Archangel Avacyn in a deck. I have seen Avacyn built as a blink deck. It's a 5-mana Avacyn. When she enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And then when a non-angel you control dies, you transform Archangel of Avacyn onto the backside, which is a mini board wipe.
Yeah. Now, we have a lot of legends that are good to blink, but we also have a lot of legends that just care about blinking nowadays.
Yes.
It is a well-supported theme at this point. And, even red has gotten in on the action. We know that white cares about blinking, but red, we've seen some stuff. I love this include in what the things that can really make the most of it. Cadric Soulkindler, a newer card to exist. Also 2 in a Boros, 4 mana total for a 4/3.
He's
That's
chonky.
Nice. He's chonky. He's a chonky dwarf wizard who says the legend rule doesn't apply to tokens you control. And whenever another non-token legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 mana. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that. It gains haste, and you sack it at the beginning of the next end step.
Cadric's great in this deck. You can cast your commander, you can make a token copy, you can exile 2 things, and then you have a free Éowyn that can attack right now. Love it.
It's great even without the blink, just because the deck is going to have so many legendary creatures, because that's what Éowyn gives protection. But with the blink, my goodness, it is just that much better.
Really solid. Yeah, you can, because it's just an ETB trigger, so anytime you blink it, you can do it again. This next guy cares about ETB triggers as well. It's Preston, the Vanisher. And he's awesome in this deck. It's 3 and a white for a rabbit wizard, already great. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't cast, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 0/1 white illusion. So if you can blink your commander, you make a tiny version of her, which means she can exile anything because her power is 0. It'll get sacrificed if you don't have something like Cadric on board, but you've already done the ETB, which is very powerful. So I love Preston in combination with Éowyn.
Yeah, that power synergy is just a real, cool. Extra bonus, making something a positive that is often sort of a drawback. Usually being 0/1 is a drawback.
Right.
But in this case, not so much.
Not here. Another one I love including in blink decks is Jaxus, the Troublemaker. She doesn't blink things exactly, but makes token copies that have blitz. So especially with legends, you can use Jaxus to copy Éowyn. You make a token copy of Éowyn, get the ETB, and then it dies and you draw a card from the blitz. You do have to discard to activate the ability, so it's a loot rather than card positive. But really solid in this deck and also very good in an aggressive deck. Yeah, she should go in here, shouldn't she?
Yeah, it's Elesh Norn, Mother of Machine, the card that we are hesitating to talk about, but we just have to. It's legends that you're blinking, so it's legends with ETBs. She is literally the queen of legends with ETBs, it feels like.
Yeah, for sure.
5 mana for a 4/7 vigilance. Panharmonicon for you. Torpor for everyone else.
For them. She throws the best parties, Elesh Norn. So she definitely goes into this deck. I also really like Feather the Redeemed in blink decks, specifically if you're blinking with spells, because if you target a creature, you exile that blink spell and then you get it back at the next end step back to your hand.
Yeah, and you're going to be wanting blinking with spells a lot in this deck.
Yeah.
Things like Conjurer's Closet and Teleportation Circle that happen at your end step and that Feather wouldn't necessarily care about also aren't the best with Éowyn.
Yeah.
Because
you get the exile again, which is okay, but the protection only lasts like A teeny bit.
A split second. And yeah, that protection and just its power in combat is a lot of how you want to close out the game when you're building an Éowyn deck. So having the ways that you're blinking your creatures support that is definitely what you want.
Yeah, I think this deck wants more ephemerates. Cheap. I mean, obviously, if you're playing Blink, you're playing ephemerate, but it's just the really cheap 1 mana Blink spell with rebound means you get 2 cards out of it. If you've got Feather, you can ephemerate all day. I also really like Scroll Shift and Acrobatic Maneuver, which are both 2 and a white. They blink something, bring it right back to the battlefield, and then you draw a card. I don't think, like, this deck is more of a, like, blink stuff when you need to deck rather than like blink for value, I think. So just having these targeted spells that you spend a little bit more mana on, but they cantrip, that feels very powerful to me, especially with Feather when you can keep spending that same card over and over again.
Yeah, with Feather, they absolutely shine. And yeah, I think they're perfectly solid, even without Feather. It's fun to have a Boros aggro deck that's kind of doing a sneaky thing with the timing of when you're blinking stuff. No one ever knows, are you about to be able to have protection from the spell that I'm going to try to use to remove one of your things?
Right. It's very scary. So it's definitely an aggro deck that you want to keep the mana open because you do want to be suspicious. That is how you keep your board protected. And then, of course, if you want to be sneaky and be able to blink stuff, you put Eldrazi Displacer in the deck. It's very good, and it infinite combos with just about everything. I did want to mention to keep an eye out for blink spells that come back at end of turn. A lot of spells that they leave the battlefield and come back right away, and that's much stronger with Éowyn than something like Charming Prince, which enters the battlefield, exiles them, and then they come back at end of turn. It doesn't make her protection as good, and it doesn't work as like a board protection or removal protection.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep moving. I think that this deck could also just be like, yeah, you have your blink spells, sure, like 1 or 2, but it's just beatdown. It's just Boros unblockable monsters.
Yeah, if you have a board of big enough legends to take someone out and all you need is to be able to actually get them through, Éowyn has you covered there, but you need to build that board up. So you want legends that really support a combat strategy.
Yeah.
And one that definitely does that is Aurelia the War Leader.
The OG.
The OG. 2 and double red and double white, so 6 total, for a 3/4 legendary angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever Aurelia the War Leader attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. If you don't have enough power to kill someone with 1 attack, you probably do to get them with 2 unblockable attacks.
Yeah, Aurelia, if you're building Boros aggro, you slam it into the deck. And I think that this deck can really be supported by a lot of like attack triggers and a lot of combat damage triggers because Éowyn promises that they get through. So I actually really love Ragavan in this deck, where I feel like Ragavan can run out of steam in a deck. It's very powerful on turn 1 through 3, and then it sort of runs out of clean attacks. Éowyn says, nope, we're still attacking with this monkey. And you can still draw that card and get that treasure every turn. Magda is very similar, where like often with Magda, you have to figure out a way to tap her without attacking with her, otherwise she dies. But Éowyn gets her through no problem.
Yeah, Lelia the Blade Reforged, yet another similar situation. At least she grows, but it is still an issue of you need to be able to attack. You want to get that card advantage.
Yeah.
Card advantage, always a thing that Boros decks are in some way hurting for. They're getting better, but
for
it's
sure.
Still a concern. One of my favorite cards to be printed last year, another extra combat card, is Karlach Fury of Avernus, 4 and a red for a 5/4 Tiefling Barbarian. Whenever you attack, doesn't have to be Karlach, can just be anything. Again, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike until end of turn for some reason. Doesn't quite matter if they can't be blocked, but you aren't going to necessarily have Éowyn every turn.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. That is the main thing the card do.
Yeah, Karlach's great. And it's basically gives Karlach haste without giving it haste, which means it feels like Aurelia, but 1 mana cheaper.
Yeah.
And only a single red versus the white, white, red, red stip. A card that I have won multiple games with, and it is brand new, is Holga Relentless Rager. This is from the Secret Lair D&D cards. It's 4 red, red for a human barbarian. It has haste, and it is a 4/6, and it says Holga must be blocked if able. Whenever she attacks, each creature you control attacking a player gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each creature that player controls. It's an enormous anthem, especially on boards that are tricky to attack. Holga makes it possible for you to just charge into somebody's board, and like maybe they'll chump a bunch of things, but you're okay with that. So I really like Holga, especially in a deck where people can't chump.
Yeah, any big anthem effect, however you want to do it, is great. And yeah, Holga, like you said, just a massive potential power boost.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going after sort of the person who is perhaps the greatest threat to you by having the second best board state.
Yeah. This could be a blink deck, but blink with hyper aggro decks tends to be a little tricky because of summoning sickness. So I do like cards that'll make copies. And Helm of the Host is a slam dunk in a deck like this. Like Helm of the Hosting Éowyn every turn, it just making a non-legendary copy of her over and over again is like, okay, every combat something's getting removed and we're not going to be able to block. At some point, people just stop playing commanders, I guess.
Yeah.
But Delina is also a good way to make copies while attacking. Okay.
Yeah.
I teased this a little bit, but I kind of like the idea of including a little bit of pump spells for your opponent's creatures.
Yeah.
Just a little.
I think that some of these are just kind of things that you want to include anyway,
Right.
or at least would not be sad to include anyway.
Yeah.
Brea's Apprentice and Bloodthirsty Blade, honestly, being two that, like, I just love running these cards in any deck that vaguely supports them regardless.
Yeah.
Brea's Apprentice is 2 and a red for a 2/3 artifact creature, human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 Thopter, and then you can tap and sacrifice an artifact to choose one. Either you exile the top card of your deck and you can play it until the end of your next turn, or target creature, who anyone controls, gets +2/+0 until end of turn. You are almost never in most commander situations using that second ability or using it for the card advantage.
Right.
But it's just great to take something that is a real problem but has 2 or 3 power, pump it up above 3, and then get your Éowyn either out or blinked.
Yeah. Bloodthirsty Blade, you pay 1 mana, you put it on your opponent's creature. It gives them +2 power, and it goads it, which normally you're doing it for the goad, but here you make it a removal target for Éowyn, which I think Bloodthirsty Blade is really sneaky cool because you're like, I'll play my commander. It's a 3-drop, like Éowyn can't exile it, and you're like, ha ha, I have this.
Yeah.
Plus it doesn't go away. You can use it over and over again.
Yeah, it's reusable, and I love that just... It's never doing nothing. I suppose if all of your opponents are creatureless, it is doing nothing.
Yeah.
But in that case, that seems great for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I love Goad. I think it's a really strong mechanic, and I would run Bloodthirsty Blade in a lot of decks just because it's a good way to deal with a creature whose main problem is that it attacks.
Yeah. I dig this deck. It's super fun. It's exactly what I want to do. I think Éowyn's going right into Dihada. Okay, we're going to move on to the next commander, which is Simic. It's Galadriel of Lothlórien. This card is sweet. It's 1 and a green and a blue for a 3/3 elf noble. It says, whenever the ring tempts you, if you chose a creature other than Galadriel as your ring bearer, scry 3. And then, whenever you scry, you may reveal the top card of your library. If a land card is revealed this way, put it onto the battlefield tapped. She's a little, what's his face? Thrasios, sort of.
Yeah, she's Thrasios but scry, which I don't think there's a good pun that combines those two words together. But if Scrysios sounds good to you, that's what she is.
She's Scrysios. Yeah, so this is, I think in this deck you're going to want incidental ways for the ring to tempt you. Because it gives you a little bit of extra value and then gets that scry 3. So some of those, the cheaper the ring tempts you cards, I think are really going to shine in this deck. I think Birthday Escape is even worth it.
I absolutely think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Scry 3 put a land out, which you're almost certainly going to be able to do when you scry 3.
Yeah. Birthday Escape is a single blue. It says draw a card and the ring tempts you. And that's it. So in this deck, if you have Galadriel out, you have to choose a creature that isn't Galadriel, so you have to have two creatures in play. But you draw a card, the ring tempts you, so you make that creature better. Then you scry 3 and supposedly get a land for 1 blue. Seems good.
Yeah, that's incredible. Bombadil's Song, another cheap option. It's a 1 and a green instant that gives a creature you control +1/+1 and hexproof until end of turn, and the ring tempts you. A great way to just get some incidental value out of the sort of spell that you already want to protect your important pieces.
Yeah, Elrond is the final thing that we were including that has the ring tempts you. It's Elrond, Lord of Rivendell specifically. 2 and a blue for an elf noble. He's a 3/2. Whenever he or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, the ring tempts you. So when creatures enter the battlefield, you scry. Great. And then a second creature enters the battlefield, you scry, and then the ring tempts you. You scry 3. And hypothetically put at least 1 land into play, but between those 2 creatures entering the battlefield.
Yeah,
Seems quite good.
Between playing Elrond and 1 other creature, if you're lucky with what's on the top of your deck, you could be getting 3 lands out just incidentally from Galadriel's ability.
Yeah.
That is a lot of ramp real fast.
Yeah, I like Elrond in this deck a whole lot. So this deck wants to scry as much as possible.
Yeah,
basically.
It wants to scry a lot. A thing that Simic is getting is sort of becoming the colors that scry. Certainly in this set, the elves are the creature type that scries.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some really good ways to scry repeatedly in Magic, and some that are especially good in a deck that also is kind of doing some landfall type stuff.
Yeah.
The first of those is Retreat to Coral Helm. It's a 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Either you may tap or untap target creature, or scry 1.
Great. Usually it's for that first ability, but the ability to like hit a land off of a scry, get a land drop, and then scry again and potentially hit another land is so cool.
Yeah, it just keeps going until you don't have a land in the top 2 cards of your deck anymore. So if you have a lot of lands in a row, or even just you're going every other card is a land for a little while, you're getting all of them.
Yeah. I mean, eventually you have to run out of lands, right? You have to.
Yeah, but then you get to use them.
But then you have lands. Merit Lage's Slumber is a very similar card, but it only works on snow lands. That's whenever a snow permanent enters the battlefield, scry 1.
Yeah, and I think, in a 2-color deck, you can get away with all basics. Don't. But you can. You can.
It's especially with like green basic fetch ramp spells. And fetches and all that. We talked about how good repeatable scry is in Retreat to Coral Helm and Merit Lage's Slumber, and also Elrond and Season of Growth and Sylvan Anthem both have that same text. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, scry 1. Great. Just keep scrying. Lifecrafter's Bestiary is a 3-mana artifact that says at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you can pay a green, and if you do, draw a card.
Thassa, God of the Sea, 2 and a blue. Yep. Also, at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Just even these things that are just, you get 1 every turn for free. You've played the card. The card does other things that you care about.
You also get to scry.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a spell on top that you're like, oh, I'd rather have that than a land, great. That's awesome. You leave that there and you draw it next turn. Mm-hmm. There's tons and tons of cards that whenever you cast something, you scry. But the more recent one that you maybe haven't used is Serum Sovereign. It's 4 and a blue for a Phyrexian Sphinx. They've come for Rivendell. It's a 4/4 flyer, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Serum Sovereign. And then you can pay a single blue and remove an oil counter from Serum Sovereign, then draw a card and scry 2. So this actually works better that you draw the card first and then scry after, because you draw the card and then you scry for a land and then Galadriel works. Where if it was scry 2 and then draw a card, you would like scry and hope that you have a spell that you hit land spell, and then you draw the spell and leave the land and hit the land. It's a little complicated.
Yeah, an important thing to know with any sort of spell, ability, whatever you have that scries and does something else, the most relevant thing being drawing cards, you'll resolve that entire thing before Galadriel will trigger. So if you play Opt, scry 1, draw a card, you have to do all of that before Galadriel resolves. It's not scry 1, do Galadriel's thing, then draw a card. So it just makes things that scry, then draw a little harder to necessarily know what the card that Galadriel is going to look at is. But still, you got to scry and draw. They're great cards. And you still, even when you don't know what the card is going to be, you don't know if you're hitting a land, you still could. There are a lot of them in your deck, presumably.
Yeah, I like a lot of just these super efficient scryers. Like Sigiled Starfish is a 2-mana starfish that just taps and scries 1. I think Mystic Speculation is the kind of card that people are just going to slam into this deck. It's a single blue for a sorcery with buyback 2, so you would pay 3 if you want to cast this with buyback. And it just says scry 3, which is enough to find a land most of the time.
Yeah, honestly, you just think about your deck. You've shuffled it up. How often are you going to go 4 cards in a row without there being a single land in there? And especially with the ability to buy it back, how often are you going to go, 8 cards in a row?
Mystic Speculation is you're like, I don't want to spend 3 mana to scry, but it's great on those turns where you're like, I really have to get this on the battlefield, but it leaves me at my mana awkward. And you can cast it for 1, scry 3, get a land, and that's perfect, like a perfectly good way to spend 1 mana. But I definitely like buyback spells because they just make you as mana efficient as possible.
Yeah.
All right. There's tons of 1-drops that have incidental scry, but what I like the most here is lands that have incidental scry. The Temples is the one that we all know best. Tapped dual lands that come in and scry 1.
You have Path of Ancestry, which cares about creature type, which because all of the elves, or at least a great many of the elves in the Lord of the Rings set, either scry or care about scrying. There's definitely a build of this that pulls a lot of Lord of the Rings cards, and all those elves are going to trigger Path of Ancestry. It's just incidental scry, often incidental ramp, whenever you're just playing the creatures you want to play anyway.
Yeah, super powerful in this deck, as are just Zalfarin Void and Crystal Grotto. They're both colorless lands that when they enter the battlefield, you scry 1, and it's just so free. You're in 2 colors. The colorless lands don't hurt you that much. And if you have the potential to play a land, ramp a land, that's a huge tempo swing, and it gives you a ton of mana. Also, just ways that you can spend mana to scry. So Castle Vantris is 4 mana to scry. Quandrix Campus is 4 mana to scry. And of course, Rivendell is the new way to do it. It's 1 in a blue, tap, scry 2, but you can only do it if you have a legend in play, which hopefully you have Galadriel in play.
Yeah, it's Commander.
That's the hope. You're going to have to read this card to me because it confuses me every single time.
Okay, so here we are. We're talking about cards that kind of care about scrying in a different way.
Yeah.
This is the Temporal Anchor. It costs 3 blue, so 6 total for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2.
Great.
Okay. Whenever you choose to put 1 or more cards on the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor. So basically, what it means is you impulse draw the cards that you put on the bottom.
Right.
That's not even quite fair.
Okay.
Whenever you put cards on the bottom of your deck while scrying, the cards you don't want, you're actually kind of just adding them to your hand, but only during your own turns.
Right. So if you have Galadriel in play and the Temporal Anchor, you scry 2. There's a land and a spell. You would tuck the spell, and then you can cast it that turn, and then you leave the land on top, and you can reveal it with Galadriel and play it.
Yeah, honestly, with the Temporal Anchor, in most situations,
you
kind of except this one,
right?
You bottom everything.
Right.
Because it is effectively just giving you more cards in your hand.
Right.
The only restriction being you can only play them on your turn. If you have a sneaky instant that you don't want people to know about,
then you top.
That's the exception. But yeah, with Galadriel, you keep the land on top because you're getting it for free, and it's not counting as your land drop for turn, which, even if you exile a lot of lands with the Temporal Anchor, it does not get around. You can play 1 land per turn.
Right. You could still, put a land on the bottom, put a land on top, play the land out of exile, and then reveal the top one.
Oh, yeah.
Get it into
absolutely. There are going to be times that you do want to put a land on the bottom and thus exile it, and thus have it in your sort of second hand.
Your second temporary hand.
Another more recent card that just kind of cares about scrying in a cool way is Kinesos, Priest of Thassa. It's 1 in a blue for a legendary Merfolk Cleric. It's a 1/3. If you would scry a number of cards, scry that many cards plus 1 instead.
Already good.
Great. And you can pay 4 mana, 3, and a Simic hybrid, either green or blue. Look at the top card of your deck. If it's a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent creature, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, you put it on the bottom of your library.
Surprise!
Surprise! It's Galadriel Sea Monsters. It's not, but just that first ability is really so relevant.
Yeah.
I think that with Galadriel, every increment of 1, the amount you're scrying goes up. The difference between scry 1 and scry 2 and scry 3 becomes kind of enormous.
Right. If you can rearrange cards, you're so much more likely to hit. Because if you only scry 1, you're blind, right? If it's not a land, you put it on the bottom and you're like, I hope there's a land. It's not. So being able to dig 2 deep is... the difference between 2 and 3 is huge as well.
Yeah, someone will do a really cool statistics thing.
I believe in them.
And I can't wait to read it, but it's not me.
So I have a question here. Do you run Eligeth in this deck? Eligeth, for those who don't know, said if you would scry a number of cards, draw that many instead. So it sort of turns your commander off, but it's really good.
It's really good. And I think you run it. I think no matter what you run it, I don't know if you always play it.
Right.
I think there are situations, if you're sitting on a huge X spell, if you're sitting on Genesis Wave, which if you are just ramping a ton, is the sort of spell that you might be running as your big finisher in this deck,
right?
Then you really just want to be getting a ton of lands out. You want Galadriel to be on. You care more about ramping into a huge late game play. If that is not the exact situation you're in, though, I absolutely think that just turning your scry into draw
really powerful
is great. And yeah, honestly, by the time you're at the 6 mana that you need to cast Eligeth in the first place, you probably have the mana to the point that you can afford to pull back on the ramp a little bit.
Right, and like draw 3 cards. Like if you have the Sylvan Anthem, when the creature enters the battlefield, you enter, draw a card immediately, and then all of your other scry stuff happens.
Yeah, and even just the incidental ring tempting scry you get from Galadriel herself becomes whenever the ring tempts you, draw 3 cards. That's
too many.
That's what Sauron is supposed to do. We'll get to that later.
Seems good. I think this deck also, it seems a little unintuitive, but I do think this deck wants a little bit of top of library, like peak stuff. I really like the reality chip. Not like it's great for equipping and casting off the top, obviously, but I like reality chip unequipped because you can just see what's happening next. You can see if you want to scry now. You can see if you want to draw a card and then scry. It just gives you a little bit more information of when to sequence your stuff, or like, should I fetch or do I want to draw that? It gives you a lot of information, and Augur of Autumn does the same thing. You may not want to be playing those lands off of the top because you want to save them, I guess, but it'll help you get creatures off the top, and it'll give you information, which in this deck, that's sort of all you're doing.
Yeah, and I kind of think you do always want a future sight.
Yeah.
The card when you can, even when it's a land that you could
just save
scry out anyway, because who knows, maybe the next card's also a land.
Also a land, yeah.
And every non-land card that you cast, whether it's Augur of Autumn and you have Coven, which if you have 3 creatures with different powers, it also lets you cast creatures off the top, or the reality chip just kind of lets you do anything. You're digging toward those lands, and so, I cast the cards on the top of my library that aren't lands, there's a land, time to scry. Do it again. All right. Hit a land again. Time to scry. Because you're just going to have a lot of opportunity to scry at least 1 at will.
Yeah. I like these cards in this deck, even if they seem a little counterintuitive. All right. So how does this deck win? You've got a ton of mana. You have all these lands.
You got a ton of mana.
There's more lands coming.
You can go big. You can just cast big stuff. But I think that the real fun way is just landfall.
Yeah.
Simic landfall? Who knew?
What? You put an Avenger of Zendikar in this deck? Nuts!
Crazy. We're in Crazy Town.
So Scootsworm in this deck is incredible. It's a landfall creature. But you also have things that say whenever a creature enters the battlefield, scry.
Yeah.
So if you have a Scootsworm and you play a land, you have 2 Scootsworms, and then they enter, you scry 2, or scry 1 twice, like scry to the bottom if they're not lands, hit the land, more Scootsworms, scry. All of your lands come out of your deck.
Yeah, literally every land will come out of your deck, and you will have enough Scootsworms to win through anything but a board wipe.
Yeah.
Or, Teferi's Protection, things like that.
Yeah. It seems pretty good. And all of the creatures that do landfall, make a creature, are going to be that way.
Yeah, you're Rampaging Balos, your Greensleeves Marrow Sorcerer, which is newer and maybe you haven't seen it yet, but it's very similar. You're just making 3/3s instead of 4/4s.
You're making 3/3 Badgers, Jamie.
Okay, yes, it's not that similar. It's not similar at all, in fact.
They're
You're
Badgers.
making 3/3 Badgers. How dare I?
And then, of course, Tatiova and AEC. Every time a land enters, you draw a card. Very good. Extra land drops, always good. Simic stuff.
Simic value.
Okay, we have lots more of the most powerful legends in Lord of the Rings to go. But first, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsors.
It can be frustrating. While my monkey bros get stronger off these bananas, there's never enough left for old Kibo Uktabi Prince. But lucky for me, I have a little secret. Factor! Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit and features a variety of options to keep you full, energized, and prepared to tackle whatever monkey business the day throws at you. So while my buddies are going bananas for their bananas, I can indulge in delicious meals, like their calorie-smart creamy Parmesan chicken. Yeah, I'm a carnivore. What's it to ya? Factor meals take just 2 minutes to prepare, are cheaper than takeout, and get delivered straight to your neck of the woods. Literally, no matter your goal, whether it's saving money or eating healthier, Factor can help you get there without having to sacrifice. So don't be a chump or a chimp, be a champ, and try it today.
Head to factormeals.com/command50 and use code command50 to get 50% off your first box. That's code command50 at factormeals.com/command50 to get 50% off your first box.
The Eldrazi are ravaging Zendikar! Chandra, Flamecaller, call forth your flames!
No can do, Gideon.
But the Eldrazi!
I called my flames 3 times this month, and my phone bill is crazy high. Plus, inflation's burning through my bank account, so...
My Pyro Paisan, you must switch to Mint Mobile. They offer premium wireless service for only $15 a month.
Whoa, are they having a fire sale?
Not at all, my incandescent comrade. By going online only, Mint Mobile eliminates the cost of retail and passes the savings on to us. With unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network, I call my allies every day to let them know I'm still alive.
And you got to keep your number and contacts?
Correct, my fiery friend.
Wow, in that case, I'll call my flames right now. Oh, hey, Flames. Yeah, can you toast this noodly fool? Thanks.
To get your new wireless plan for $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/command. That's mintmobile.com/command. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/command. Okay, my turn.
What is it, turn 20?
Okay, don't worry. I think I can finally win.
Even after this cyclonic rift?
What?
What? I'm still feeling good. Thanks to Liquid IV, I'm always ready for the long game. Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, and it's not just for die-hard athletes and marathon runners. Even if you're just going to work for the day or spending a game night with friends, proper hydration is essential. 1 stick of Liquid IV hydrates you 2 times faster than water alone. Plus, you get essential vitamins and great flavors like pina colada or strawberry. Best of all, Liquid IV is helping communities in need. They've donated over 39 million servings in 50 plus countries around the world.
Hey, this is good. I think I could go a couple more turns.
Yeah, we're all gonna mill out soon anyway.
Ooh, even after this time twister?
Oh, come on.
Seriously?
Oh my God, there's no win cards. Real people, real flavor, real hydrating. Grab your Liquid IV in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout. That's 20% off anything when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com.
Welcome back. We're going to jump right back into it with Gandalf the White. This card slaps. It's 3 white for an 4/5 Avatar Wizard with Flash. Whenever you cast, you may cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had Flash. And if a legendary permanent or an artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So, artifacts and legendaries coming in or leaving the battlefield, those abilities trigger twice. Plus, you get to cast them at Flash speed. Is this Daddy of the Machine?
Yeah, it feels that way. It's not getting every permanent the way that Mommy of Machines does.
Yeah.
But it's real close.
Right.
And, being able to play at flash speed, if
It's
you watch
so
this channel,
fun.
you know that is a high value thing to do.
Yeah, I Gandalf is extremely powerful, and honestly, it's kind of what we wanted. Like I saw Elishnorn and was like, I want a mono white flash like blinky commander, but I can't. I don't want it that. My playgroup won't deal with that, And Gandalf is that without the crazy downside that turns off all of my opponents' cards.
Yeah. Shutting off your opponent's stuff, they want to push
very
the
powerful.
arch villain of a
powerful.
story. But yeah, it does not create a fun environment, whereas Gandalf feels like it is going to create a fun environment, unless you're doing something super oppressive with it, which maybe you can.
You can.
It turns out Harmonicons are easy to go crazy with.
They sure are. So let's make some legends enter the battlefield. We're going to start there. Again, Lauren of the Third Path is great. Enters, blows up 2 things. I really like Legion's Landing, which just enters, makes 2 1/1 vampires. It just 1 mana, make 2 bodies, and then it ramps. That's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't see Legion's Landing as a ramp spell.
It is.
It is.
It is a ramp spell.
It's
If
a
you're
1 mana
attacking,
white ramp spell.
It's great. 1 mana white ramp spell that it flips into a very powerful land that makes vampires every turn. 1 creature that is abominable to blink is Lena, Selfless Champion. She makes 1/1 white soldier creature tokens equal to the number of non-token creatures you control. So if you have 3, she enters, makes 3, you blink her, she enters, makes 3 more, and then you can sacrifice her to give all creatures with power less than Lena's power, which is 3, indestructible until end of turn. So a little bit of board protection, a little bit of go wide. It's exactly what white wants.
Yeah, and while it obviously doubles the ETB triggers of things that are entering the battlefield themselves, it also doubles the ETB triggers that other permanents have when stuff shows up.
Right.
Cathar's Crusade being a prime example. It's obviously not going to double up every trigger, but whenever it is a legendary or an artifact, including artifact creatures, that would trigger Cathar's Crusade, it's doubling those. Everything's getting 2 bigger. Things like Rumor Gatherer, it itself is not legendary, but it has sort of that alliance, aka creature fall ability, that whenever it is a legendary or artifact creature that is doing it, you're going to get it twice, which in the Rumor Gatherer instance means draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like an artifact land come into play with a Felidar Retreat, you get 2 triggers off of that Felidar Retreat, or if it's a legendary land. Seems good.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun cards that are worth looking at that don't ETB off themselves.
Right.
Where
can be triggered by a legendary or artifact permanent.
Yeah, it's a fun way to go. But it's not just ETB, it's LTB. It's leaving the battlefield, which death is one way that a creature can leave the battlefield. Perhaps the most common way.
You're explaining this to your children.
Yeah.
Death is one way we could leave the battlefield, kids.
When you're gathering your children to read them Lord of the Rings, just mention that death is how they leave the battlefield at the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Yeah. But a creature that I love with a death trigger is Ao the Dawn Sky.
So good.
Out of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. 3 white, so 5 total for a 5/4 legendary dragon spirit. It has flying and vigilance, and when it dies, you can choose one. Either you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and you can choose any number of non-land permanents that have a total mana value of 4 or less and put them onto the battlefield. Or you put 2 +1/+1 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or vehicle, because vehicles were a big thing in the set in which this came out.
It's either a ton of power or the board that you're missing to put power on next time. And it triggers twice.
7 cards deep is a lot. You have a lot of artifacts in this deck, presumably also because Gandalf cares about artifacts. If you are so lucky as to double this trigger and just hit 2 2-mana rocks and then 2 2-mana rocks again,
really powerful.
That is a huge influx of ramp.
Yeah, especially in mono white.
Yeah, or, +4/+4 across your entire board. Also not bad. Or I believe you can do it a split.
I think, you could look at the top 7, put something into play, and then put counters on it.
Yeah, when you copy a modal spell or ability, you have to copy the modes, but this is not doing that. It is just having the ability trigger an additional time, which means you can make a different choice.
Yeah. These dragon spirits love to die, and Yosei, the Morning Star, is also a very powerful death trigger, but it can really slow a game down. So if you have the mind to use Yosei, which when it dies, target player skips his or her next untap step, tap up to 5 target permanents that player controls. If you are interested and your playgroup is interested in that kind of play, just recognize that it really does slow things down, unless you can kill them the next turn. This, again, like ETBs being triggered by legendary permanents, you could get legendaries dying that trigger other things, specifically equipment. My favorite is Skull Clamp.
Yeah, Skull Clamp is great. Even if you put Skull Clamp on, a servo token or a Thopter token, that is an artifact. So it is an artifact leaving the battlefield.
Hey, you draw 4 cards?
Draw 4 cards feels good.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, we've been saying the word legendaries a lot. There are absolutely just pure artifact builds of this that lean into...
Clamp a Thopter and draw 4 cards?
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
It's wild. Things like Heirloom Blade and Death Render, just more equipment that has slightly more complicated death triggers. They do more than draw cards, either letting you go nab creatures into your hand or cheat out creatures from your hand onto the battlefield. Getting to do that twice, they are already pretty good effects.
Yeah.
They are super good when you get to do them twice.
Yeah, I love these, and it's very cute. It's definitely the kind of thing that your table is like, that works? And you're like, that works. Let's talk about some artifacts. There are lots of ETB artifacts that we love to use, starting with our favorite, Lonely Boy. It's Solemn Simulacrum. Double as ETB and double as dies. Oh, isn't that good?
Yeah, how can he still be a sad robot?
Wow, he's got 2 lands.
A commander who supports both of his abilities?
He's never felt more supported. Our Chaomancer's map comes in, grabs you 4 planes now, and you can put them into play with that sort of half a burgeoning ability.
Skyclave Relic, if you kick it, you are getting 4 copies of it instead of the 2. That is, 6 mana for 5 mana of forever ramp.
Seems okay to me. I like Coveted Jewel in this deck. You pay 6 mana at ETBs, you draw 6 cards, and you get 3 mana back. So it's basically 3 mana, draw 6. That's ridiculous. Plus, you're going to have sack outlets for your artifacts, so you can get rid of it if an opponent can get through.
Yeah, we have one that Mommy of Machines would be happy to see Daddy of Machines playing.
Yeah.
It is Portal to Phyrexia.
That's how they see each other.
Yeah. Gandalf and Elesh Norn have a great relationship. I will not hear otherwise. Portal to Phyrexia, of course, you're paying 9 for it, but you're making each opponent sacrifice 6 creatures.
Ugh. And then you can reanimate something for your trouble on upkeep. Mirror Battlesphere comes in and makes 8 1/1 colorless mirrors. That's also good. One of my favorite cards in mono white is Angel of the Ruins. This is a 7 mana angel that enters and exiles up to 2 artifacts and enchantments, doubled its 4, plus it has plane cycling. So it's great to pitch into the bin and get that land and then reanimate it later to exile 4 things. Oh my god.
It's nutty. It's nutty.
Fun one to double on the ETB is Wedding Ring.
Yeah.
Turn that pod into a polycule, everybody.
It's what Daddy and Mommy want.
They need Frodo in here as well. Wedding Ring, when it enters, you give a token copy to one person, and if you enter and double that ability, you could give either 2 to the same person or split it up and give 1 to each person. And then anytime any person with a wedding ring on their turn draws a card or gains life, everybody that's married also does. It's can get messy. Ton of fun.
Then, of course, again, artifacts. They don't just have ETBs. They have LTBs or death triggers. Wormcoil Engine, one of the most iconic death triggers among artifact creatures out there. You have your 6/6. It dies. You're getting 12/12 worth of total power and toughness with a combo of Death Touch and Lifelink. 2 very relevant abilities. Hangerback Walker. It dies. You're just making a ton of Thopters, presumably.
You can clamp and draw 4 cards off of.
You've got things like Scrap Trawler and sort of any of the artifacts that when they die, you can get something back, or when something else dies, you can get something back. You can really get into a loop quite easily with Gandalf. Just if you have any way to sack artifacts or artifact creatures for mana, it triggers. You bring 2 of them back. Right.
The Krark-Clan Ironworks and a Scrap Trawler. Classic artifact mess.
You don't need Gandalf to make that work, but he can make it work even easier.
Yeah, for sure. What I really like in this deck is Slagstone Refinery. If you're building around artifacts specifically, this is a 4-mana artifact. It's uncommon from Brothers War, and it's whenever it or another non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield or is put into exile from the battlefield, you create a tapped Power Stone token. Power Stone tokens can be used to cast more artifacts or activate the abilities of artifacts. This is a huge amount of mana to make very, very quickly, especially in a deck that wants to run a lot of eggs. Eggs are just artifacts that you sacrifice usually to draw a card. And there's an infinite number of them. You could fill this deck with eggs, and each one of them would like draw 2 cards. Starting with like Chromatic Star is a 1-mana one that when it enters, it does nothing, but when it goes to the graveyard, you draw a card.
Yeah. It's just great.
Yeah.
Just draw 2 cards when you would draw 1.
And it sacrifices itself. So you pay 2 mana and you draw 2 cards. And it goes to the graveyard and you can bring it back and do it again. That seems okay.
Yeah. Recurring eggs, very good. We didn't invent this.
Yeah. It's worth noting that with eggs, you have to look for specifically triggered abilities. You can't double up activated abilities. So there are some that say like pay 1 and sack it to draw a card. Those aren't as good as the ones that say when this enters or when this goes to the graveyard. You double it up.
Yeah. You are looking for the word when.
When, yes. We'll tell you it is a trigger. There's lots of artifact support in white, more than you'd think, starting with Tashar. Anytime I get to play a Tashar, I'm the happiest baby alive. Whenever you cast a historic spell, legendary, or artifact, perfect, you return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield.
If that creature is in turn legendary or an artifact and maybe has an ETB, because that's a thing that you would be running a lot of in this deck, you are getting multiple uses of it. If you have sack outlets, especially with sort of the artifact scrap trawler thing we've been talking about, Tashar is a great way to turn sort of a loop that maybe isn't netting you mana or netting you cards into something that is. It just sort of gives you free resources in a loop where maybe you otherwise had to spend resources.
Oswald Fiddlebender is really, really good in this deck. He's a sack outlet for artifacts. He's a legend himself, but also you can cast him at flash speed. So typically Oswald is a little slow because he has summoning sickness, but if you cast this 2-mana 2/2 on end step, you can activate him right away, and he's a birthing pod effect for artifacts. And then like Auriok Salvagers is sort of a classic infinite combo piece that you can pay 1 and a white to return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand if it's 1 mana or less.
Yeah, and then sort of one specific way to go if you are doing an artifacts build is modular.
It's so fun.
Now, modular is an ability that has a creature enter the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, you can put its +1/+1 counters on another target artifact creature. Now, notably with Gandalf, you are not doubling up the number of creatures it enters with. That is not a triggered ability, it's just a thing that happens. But the death trigger is getting doubled up, which every modular creature will have one. So Arcbound Ravager, just a true staple in literally any modular deck. It's a 2 mana for a 0/0, but with modular 1. So it enters with 1 +1/+1 counter. And it just says, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Arcbound Ravager.
Yep. And notably, Arcbound Ravager can sack himself and put all of those counters somewhere else. On something like Arcbound Stinger. There's a ton of ways to use modular in Trixie-like, and the Ozolith is also going to be a big part of this because the Ozolith is a leaves the battlefield ability and is both legendary and an artifact. So you can double up those triggers as well.
Yeah, and the way that things work when it refers to sort of those counters, it's really referring to sort of a number of a certain kind of counters.
Right.
So it can double up the number of counters that go on the Ozolith. It isn't literally pulling them off of it.
Yeah.
It's just looking at how many were there. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
But with Gandalf, it's saying how many were there. Okay, I'll do twice that many.
And then you can put it somewhere else and they'll have modular. It stacks up a lot.
Yeah. And all these things have flash with Gandalf. So, surprise. I flash in something, sack it,
Ozolith
put
in
counters on
response to a
something
board
else.
wipe or something. Ooh.
Yeah, there's wild stuff you can do.
Really cool. This Gandalf is so fun. I'm obsessed, but I also love mono white. All right, we're going to keep moving over to the bad guys side of the line with the Lord of the Nazgûl. This is 3 a blue and a black for a 4/3 flying Wraith Noble. It says, Wraiths you control have protection from ring bearers. So good. Every time I see Ring Bearer, I picture a little boy with a pillow. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 3/3 black wraith creature token with menace. Then, if you control 9 or more wraiths you control have base power and toughness 9/9 until end of turn. Very flavorful, very powerful.
Yeah, 9/9/9s gets the job done.
With menace.
Yeah, and just sort of looking at cards that whenever you cast some kind of spell, make some kind of token. We talked about this with General Ferrus Rockerick earlier. A 4/4 is kind of one of the best that you get.
Right.
So a 3/3 with menace, that is arguably just as good. The menace is certainly, I would say, worth 1 power and 1 toughness.
Yeah.
And it's just off any spell. It's off your 1-minute cantrips. That's,
Those instants and sorceries can turn into very real power on the board. And it itself is a wraith, so you only need 8 other wraiths for them to be 9/9s immediately. And in a blue-black, it's easy to storm. Or you could cast other wraiths. We went straight to Scryfall and we were like, what are the wraiths? Show me the wraiths. And they're very bad. But there are a few options.
Yeah, we finally found a home for Canoptic Wraith.
Yeah!
We have Burnished Heart at home if your home is the 40k universe. It's 3 mana for a 2/1 artifact creature Wraith. Because it has wraith because it has wraith form, it cannot be blocked. But it also, of course, is a transdimensional scout. So when it deals combat damage to a player, you can pay 3 mana and sacrifice it. And if you do, you search your library for up to 2 basic land cards with the same name as a land you control, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So you're getting islands or swamps. It's a
ramp piece if you need it to be, and it's a late game wraith that's an unblockable 9/9 if you need it to be. It seems sweet in this deck.
It does seem sweet in this deck. You know, I think there's an argument to be made that if you have 9/9/9s, some of which have menace, maybe the fact that one of them also happens to be unblockable isn't the biggest deal. But you know,
there's always
1 out of 100
player.
times, it is a big deal.
Yeah. There's always a token player. They printed a number of wraiths in this set, of course, because the Nazgûl themselves are wraiths. So you could put the Nazgûl card in it. This is the 2 and a black for a Wraith Knight. It's a 1/2 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you. And then whenever the ring tempts you, put a +1 counter on each wraith you control. Hey, make them even bigger than 9/9s. And a deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgûl. So it's another like 7 Dwarves type thing. You could put all 9 Nazgûl in the Lord of the Nazgûl deck.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's very cool. I do personally think that, unless you're going real hardcore storm build here, the first include that I would click is just Nazgûl
9 times. Yeah.
Especially because, Lord of the Nazgûl's ability that makes everything a 9/9, that's base power and toughness. So the +1/+1 counters that the Nazgûl put on each other as they show up increases that. So there'll be at least 10 10s, 11 11s, and so on.
Yeah. Witch King of Angmar is another wraith that they have printed. It's 3 black for a Wraith Noble. It's his other card. It's a 5/3 flyer, and whenever 1 or more creatures deal combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt combat damage to you this turn. So if they hit you, they have to sack a thing. Then the ring tempts you. It also says discard a card. Witch King of Angmar gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. This card's very obnoxious.
Yeah, it's a real don't attack me situation.
Yeah.
And that ring tempts you is honestly because the actual Nazgûl cards get bigger when you do that. Like, that's relevant.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Wraith synergy going on. Also, you know what is good in this deck, finally?
We finally did it. We broke black market connections.
It makes Wraiths, everybody.
It makes Wraiths.
Is it finally worth it to full send?
I think it just might be. No, I love this card. It was my favorite card of last year, full stop. It's 2 and a black. At the beginning of your pre-combat man phase, you choose 1 or more of the following 3 modes. Make a treasure lose 1 life, draw a card lose 2 life, or make a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter with changeling, so it's every creature type including Wraith, lose 3 life. So it's 6 life total, card, treasure, Wraith.
Yep. Seems very solid in this deck. And if you want to complete your Wraith package, a little Changeling Outcast goes a long way. That could be it's a 1 mana unblockable Changeling creature, which means it's a little Wraith. A little baby Wraith.
And if you want to run other creatures that aren't wraiths, which I suppose you have the right to do, you could run Maskwood Nexus. It makes all your creatures every creature type, which again includes wraith. You're in black, so if you kind of want to do sort of a Mimi build where you're kind of relying on this, you are in the right colors to be tutoring for it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There also are a few other wraiths that have Swamp Walk. They are overcosted and underpowered. But you could put them in this deck, and I would salute you for it.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going more of the creature-y themed build, you could go put some payoffs in there for wraiths. Kindred Discovery, classic, draw a lot of cards. And it also, it says basically every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you make a wraith and draw a card. Ugh.
Yeah, your cantrips become double cantrips. It's pretty nutty. I think that one goes in whether you are doing a particularly creature-y build or not.
Yeah. And Kindred Dominance is 5 black for a sorcery. Choose a creature type. Destroy all creatures that aren't of that creature type.
As we covered, there aren't many good wraiths. Yeah. Your opponents are unlikely to have them.
I would be shocked if your opponent had wraiths. Cover of Darkness is also fun if you want to give your wraiths fear flavor. I love this idea of just making a wraithier version of this and being like, I'm having all the Nazgûl, I'm building all and we're going to put a bunch of wraiths on the board and attack for a huge amount of power. Mm-hmm. But you could also just put a ton of really cheap instants and sorceries that keep chaining together and build a huge board very quickly and at instant speed usually.
Yeah, just all your instant speed cantrips, your opts, your considers, things like that. Just pay 1 mana, draw a card, maybe do some scrying and surveilling, but also get a 3/3 with Menace. Also some sorcery speed ones, Get Probe, Frantic Search, which you can do at instant speed and is kind of free. You're not netting a card, but you're getting card selection. Mm-hmm. There's just so many ways to cast a ton of instants and sorceries, keep your hand full, and not actually use that much mana to do it.
And your commander is expensive. It's a 5 mana creature that is scary. So you do want to make sure you have a very high density of cheap spells that you can cast the turn it comes down. That's why Get Probe is so powerful, because you can pay 5 mana, cast a Get Probe, and at least you get 1 wraith out of it. But you do kind of want to hold up these 1 mana instants so you can get a little bit of value out of it in case somebody comes for it. Or, hold up counter spells. But because of that, free spells are going to be really, really good, as they often are.
Yeah.
Deadly Rollick will get you a wraith, remove a thing, and be free. Snuff Out is a free spell if you control a swamp and you pay 4 life. And Submerge is if you control an island and an opponent controls a forest, you can put something on top of an opponent's library for free. So making sure you can get value out of your commander when you invest 5 mana in it is extremely important in this deck.
Yeah, absolutely. A 3/3 is really meaningful. So, even if you're in a position where you just get 1 and then you lose it, your opponent had to use a removal spell, you've still done okay. So being able to come out in a position where you can at least feel good about sort of how the turn cycle went, even if you lost your commander, it's important to set yourself up for success in that way and not just play it out undefended without even getting to sort of make a wraith off its ability.
And if you can't get to free, you could get to near free with cost reducers. Baral, Chief of Compliance, is very good. It makes instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast, which in this deck is going to be huge. You want to cast as many instants and sorceries as possible. Haughty Djinn does a similar thing. I could also see running Phyrexian Altar in this deck if you really want to storm off, because you can turn the instants and sorceries into wraiths and the wraiths into mana and keep chaining until you're mana positive.
Yeah, especially if your win con is actually more based in your spells and you're just kind of using Lord of the Nazgûl to host your storm shell off the fact that it's making these tokens. I think that Phyrexian Altar is absolutely a way that you do that, is it's just turning your spells into mana neutral, or at least cheaper.
Right. If you are running these abilities where you cast instants and sorceries and you make more stuff, you might as well get more bang for your buck. This is a Talrand Sky Summoner deck, probably. If you're into Talrand hanging out with the Nazgûl, I guess. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you make a Drake. Murmuring Mystic gives you a 1/1 bird for your trouble, and Sedgemoor Witch has Magecraft, which means that whenever you cast or copy one, you get a pest token. So all of those turn spells into bodies, which is going to be good. If you have a Maskwood Nexus, they're wraiths as well.
They are. It's relevant. It's real. You could get to 9 real quick. You also just want to be making sure you don't run out of spells, which, you're unlikely to do, but you gotta make sure. Archmage Emeritus goes in any Spellslinger deck, honestly.
Yep.
Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. And then I really like Gale Waterdeep Prodigy. It basically reads, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to cast the other one from your graveyard. So you cast an instant, you get to cast a sorcery from your graveyard, and vice versa. You do have to pay for it. It's not you get it for free.
Yeah.
But it really just means that, if you have a cantrip in your graveyard, you have an opt in your graveyard, you play a sorcery, and I'll pay 1 extra mana to draw a card here. You do exile it, so it's not to infinity, but it's just a great way in a Spellslinger deck to get to cast more spells than you might have in your hand.
Yeah, just get the most out of the spells that you are casting. We've talked about it before, but there is combo potential. Whenever you cast a spell, you make a wraith, so let's cast infinite spells. Isochron and Dramatic Reversal works here as well. We'll give you infinite wraiths that are all 9/9s with menace. And you know what? I think the Lord of the Nazgûl would love an infinite combo.
Yeah.
He's like, get me out of here. Come on. I like to include this if I use the Dramatic Reversal Isochron Scepter combo. I really like Muddle the Mixture in those decks as well, because it is a 2-mana counter spell that counters instants or sorceries, but also transmutes to tutor for a 2-drop. And both Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter are 2-drops. So, nice, tidy tutor counter. Let's keep moving with another baddie. It's Saruman of many colors. This Saruman is a 6-drop. It's 3 white, blue, black. He's Esper for an Avatar Wizard. He's a 5/4 with Ward, discard an enchantment, instant, or sorcery card. So in order to target him with a spell or ability, you also have to also discard one of those things. And then it says, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, each opponent mills 2 cards. When 1 or more cards are milled this way, exile target enchantment, instant, or sorcery with equal or lesser mana value than that spell, referring to the second spell higher up, from an opponent's graveyard. Copy the exiled card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost.
This ability needs a playbook with X's, O's, and arrows pointing at each other to explain what it does.
It's such a disaster. Why is it such a mess? Okay, so the confusing thing about this is it says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, each opponent mills 2 cards. And then it says when you mill, and you're like, I just milled, what? But what they're doing is they're adding an additional trigger in the middle of this ability. So it means that when you choose an instant, sorcery, or enchantment from your opponent's graveyard, it could be one of the milled cards. Otherwise, the ability wouldn't be able to target one of the milled cards. So they had to sort of split those 2 things with an additional when trigger. It also gives your opponents a space to interact post-mill. So that's why it's sort of weird and confusing. Yeah. But basically, whenever you cast your second spell, everybody mills 2, and you get to cast an instant or sorcery of lesser mana value for free.
Yeah, or enchantment, I believe.
Or enchantment. Yeah, instant, sorcery, enchantment, yeah.
Yeah, those are the types he interacts with.
Yeah, it's like sort of the magic-y stuff.
Yeah.
He doesn't mess with the baubles or anything. He messes with curses and the like.
Essences and effects.
Yeah, exactly. The sparkly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to include this because this is something that often gets confused. If you cast an enchantment spell from your opponent's graveyard, you are casting a copy of that enchantment. So you're getting a token copy. But that doesn't mean that it works with cards like Anointed Procession, because the spell, the copied spell, turns into the token. You are not creating a token. So it doesn't work with Anointed Procession. Okay. Oh, I wanted to take a second to talk about Ward, because there's a lot of Ward in this deck, in this set, and this is a very powerful Ward.
Yeah, it's a very specific Ward ability. It's one that you just want to make sure you're getting it right, because you don't want to put anyone at an unnecessary disadvantage. A lot of people can see it as a shorthand that, in order to target that creature, I also have to do the thing it says after Ward, pay that cost. That's not technically what it is. It's whenever you do target, or rather whenever an opponent targets one of your things with Ward, a trigger goes on the stack that says, counter the thing you just did unless you pay this, which does mean something that says this can't be countered, you don't have to pay the ward cost. Do not discard a card if you are targeting it with something that can't be countered, like Void Rend.
Yeah. Void Rend specifically says this spell can't be countered, and Ward will try to counter it, but fail. So if you have a way to make things that can't be countered, like with the cute little halfling card.
The Delighted
Halfling. That means it cannot be countered by Ward at all. Okay, so it says whenever you cast your second spell, which means we're probably going to be casting a second spell as many times as possible.
Mm-hmm. They've printed some things that also care about that.
They sure have. Ledger Shredder is going to be the big, powerful one. Whenever anybody casts their second spell, you connive, draw a discard, and maybe counter. But this next one I think is really sick in this deck, and it's another class.
It is a monk class. It costs a white and a blue. Its starting ability is the second spell you cast each turn costs one less to cast. That's pretty good. I'm going to be doing that every turn. That's effectively a rock. When you level it up for yet another 1 white and 1 blue, you can return up to one target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. A nice removal thing to just have on hand. Mm-hmm. And then after that, if you pay an additional 3 mana, 1 white and a blue, it gains the ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. For as long as it remains exiled, it has, you may cast this card from exile as long as you've cast another spell this turn. So basically, this can be your second spell, but it can't be your first.
Yeah. It's a tidy little enchantment that just kind of does it all. I like Monk class a lot in this deck. Plus, you got to bring the Storm of Saruman, which triggers whenever you cast your second spell. It's his Storm. You can't leave his Storm at home. It's 4 blue for an enchantment with Ward 3. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it, except the copy isn't legendary, and you may choose new targets for the copy. That's great. We want to cast our bigger spell second in this deck, so you're going to be copying your more impactful spell, largely, with the Storm. Mm-hmm. We wanted to talk about big spells, high CMC spells, that could potentially be your second spell.
But that you don't necessarily have to pay a ton of mana to actually cast.
Right.
Because it's an important part of the commander's ability that the spell you get for free from an opponent's graveyard does have to cost less than the second spell that you cast. So when you cast something with a huge mana value, you are basically giving yourself the pick of your opponent's graveyards.
Right.
So cards like Treasure Cruise are a great example. 7 and a blue, draw 3 cards, but delve. So you could be paying 1 mana and exiling a bunch of stuff, which you're milling, to draw 3 cards, and then you get to cast anything that costs less than 8 from an opponent's graveyard. Yeah. That should be basically literally any card you want.
And that's like their Bolas's Citadel, that's like their Wrath or something. It just gives you a ton of options when you have those high CMC spells. Dig Through Time does something similar, but it's an instant, which is great because we can trigger it on other turns that aren't ours. I really like Ethereal Forager. It's a 4 blue and a blue for an elemental whale. It's a 3/3 with delve, so you can cast it for 2 mana, but its CMC is 6. It has flying, and whenever it attacks, you may return an instant or sorcery card exiled with Ethereal Forager, so delved away, to its owner's hand. This deck, I think, wants to run a lot of cantrips, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So I think if you're binning all of these little 1 mana spells, you can cast this Ethereal Forager and return all of those cheap spells back to your hand, so you can trigger your second spell ability again.
Yeah. Also, it's a Sky Whale.
Yeah. Saruman likes those.
That's established.
I think so. I think that's...
If you turn to page first in your Lord of the Rings copy.
Saruman of many colors, also whales. All right, we've talked a lot about the second spells, but the first spell is just as important. And like we said previously, we want it to be cheap. I like Thought Scour the most in this deck because it says target player mills 2 cards, draw a card. So you can mill an opponent and then draw a card and cast your next spell and get something for free.
Yeah, Thought Scour goes in, I think, any deck that wants cantrips and cares at all about any graveyard. This is absolutely very much both of those things. But then you kind of just want the classics. You want the Ponders, the Preordains, the Serum Visions.
Serum Visions, anything that you can just get the turn started in order to follow up playing the Saruman. You also want the cheap spells because he's 6 mana and you really do sort of want to trigger him. So if you can cast Saruman and then follow it up like with a 1 or 2 drop, like even if you just cast a Preordain after casting Saruman, you could still cast a Swords to Plowshares or a Path to Exile or like a Faithless Looting. You can still find 1 drops in your opponent's graveyard.
Yeah.
So.
And, this is obviously, we just talked about it with Lord of the Nazgûl, but something like Deadly Rollick is especially a good one because that's your second spell, and you're actually going to get a wider breadth of options to cast from your opponent's graveyards. Just because Deadly Rollick, you're getting it for free, but its mana value is still 4.
Yeah, Submerge, Snuff Out. All of those are very good in this deck as well.
But then you also want spells that kind of just get you your second spell at the same time.
Yeah, buy one, get one spells.
Yeah, so you've got Spell Twine, you've got Mission Briefing that sort of surveils and then is a Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage himself would be a good option here. But just a great big splashy one is Mnemonic Deluge. It's 9 mana, 6 blue, blue, blue for a sorcery. Exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Copy that card 3 times. You may cast the copies without paying their mana costs, and then you exile Mnemonic Deluge. So you're already milling stuff for your opponents, so if you don't have a great option, they will. You get to cast it a bunch of times, and the first of those copies you cast will be your second spell for the turn after Mnemonic Deluge. So you're also, in the middle of these 3 instances of a spell, going to get one more of something else.
Yeah. This is great because it just is 2 spells in 1 card. And it's hilarious. You're milling your opponents. You're going to hit something sweet. I also kind of like Rebound in this deck because it just buys you a free first spell. So I looked at Emerged Unscathed. It's a white instant for 1 that says target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and it has Rebound. So your commander has a very powerful ward effect, so it's not likely that it'll be targeted, but you are running a lot of other scary things. So you can use Emerge Unscathed to give something protection from a removal spell or a damage board wipe, and then it could be your free first spell on the next turn.
Yeah, even Ephemerate, which we talked about with Éowyn, a great rebound option, another way to protect your own stuff.
Yeah.
And if you give Saruman protection after they've paid that ward cost, that's brutal.
That's devastating. Another way to get sort of buy one, get one, your second spell is Cascade. So you can cast something like Sakashima's Protege, which is 4 blue, blue for a shapeshifter. It has Flash and Cascade, and then it enters as a clone. So Sakashima's Protege, you cast it for 6 on an opponent's turn. That's your first spell. You'll Cascade into another spell. That's your second spell. Trigger Saruman on an opponent's turn, which is already hard to do, and you've done it. Great. You mill 2 cards, you get to cast a free spell, and then Sakashima's Protege enters the battlefield and clones something. That's such a turn.
Yeah,
that's such a turn. Yeah, I really like Sakashima's Protege in this deck, as well as Forceful Denial, which is a 5-mana counterspell with Cascade. I don't normally like 5-mana counterspells, but in this deck, because it triggers your commander and you get another spell out of it, so you basically get to Cascade twice. There's a lot in a box here. Plus, you're countering whatever an opponent's spell is doing. It feels like it's a 3-for-1. 3-for-1? 1, 2, 3. It's a 3-for-1. There we go. And then you get 2 extra spells. So it's a 3-for-1. But that's great. For 5 mana, I don't know.
It's great. I mean, it is notable. Like, this is a real example of how you're going to pull it off. Saruman does not care if it's your turn. If you cast 2 spells on someone else's turn, that's perfectly valid. If you do it on your turn, if you have some way of casting 2 spells on every turn in the cycle, you're getting that trigger every turn of the cycle.
Really good. So Saruman incidentally mills. But 2 a turn is not that many. So I do think the deck should be supported with some amount of incidental mill.
Yeah, especially just, not every deck cares that much about its instant sorceries and enchantments.
Right.
But they're all going to have some. You just need to get them in the graveyard.
Yeah, you may have to dig a little bit. So I think this deck probably runs like a Memory Erosion. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. You're not planning on milling them out. You just want to look. You just want to dig through their deck a little bit. Realm Breaker, the invasion tree, I thought was kind of cool. It's a 3-mana legendary artifact, and it's 2 and tap. Target opponent mills 3 cards. Then you can put a land from their graveyard onto the battlefield, tapped under your control. And if it goes to the graveyard, it would be exiled instead. But it says some stuff about gods, but you're probably not worried about that. Gods? Praetors. Excuse me. Also gods. All
God
hail.
Adjacent.
So there's a little bit of incidental mill, some incidental ramp. It's just doing a lot of things that work with your commander.
Yeah.
If you're milling, I really like Windfall. I mean, if you just want cards in your graveyard, that's enough. it adds like an extra 6 cards into everybody's graveyard, gives you a fresh hand. Windfall's going to be great.
Yeah, often it's going to be, the cards they were hanging on to.
Yeah.
Which a lot of the time are going to be relevant instants and sorceries.
Yeah. And I think this deck, you're playing the baddie. You're going to try and take stuff out of their graveyard. So let's put a couple of more cards in there that do that. Breach the Multiverse is a board in a box, and it also mills. It's 5 black. Each player mills 10 cards. Great. What a selection. A bounty of cards you could cast. And then you reanimate a creature for each player that milled that way. So you get a bunch of creatures and get their graveyard loaded up for the next spell. Seems quite good.
Yeah, I really like this card, Incarnation Technique.
Yeah.
It's 4 and a black for a sorcery with Demonstrate, which means that when you cast it, you can have someone else copy it. But if they do, you also get an additional copy. So you get 2, they get 1. And it just reads, mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yep.
I run this in a couple things, and you could get real unlucky, but you almost always have someone where you don't care if they get one of the creatures already in their graveyard, if they even have any, and they're just not that creature-y of a deck. So you don't mind giving this to them, and you're getting stuff.
I like Memory Plunder a lot in this deck. It's blue, black. It's 4 mana altogether, but it's a hybrid blue and black mana for each. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. That is another BOGO spell. So you cast this, then you cast that, you trigger Saruman and get their spell as well. So I think that's going to do a lot of what you want.
Yeah, I mean, just, you're already putting instants and sorceries in your opponent's graveyard that are desirable. And like we already talked about, just the buy one, get one. It's crazy value. It just does all the things that Saruman wants to do. And Memory Plunder, that just feels like a Saruman-y thing.
Give me your memories. All right, we have 4 more legendaries to get to, and we're going to get to them in just a few minutes, right after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, we are super excited to announce that we are now sponsored by ARCHIDEKT.
ARCHIDEKT is the perfect place to build and store decks online, whether you want to build from scratch or catalog your collection.
Everything is easy and intuitive. It's got the same feeling as when you sit at the table with your cards laid out right in front of you.
Then, once your deck is done and ready to go, their built-in playtester is a great tool to make sure your brews work as intended.
And now that ARCHIDEKT has partnered with EDH Rec, they have all the resources and data they need to really refine and perfect the platform. So even if you've tried ARCHIDEKT in the past, it's definitely worth taking a new look right now.
Just go to archidekt.com and start brewing on the best deck builder out there.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com.
Whether you're searching for the latest sneaker drop, that iconic handbag, a timeless watch, or your next piece of classic jewelry, eBay authenticators are there verifying every detail of your purchase.
Yep, we're talking each inch, stitch, tick, facet, and clasp that make the piece you're searching for worthy of your collection.
eBay's authenticators are experts in their craft, true connoisseurs.
And as leaders in their fields, they're making sure your items always arrive as authentic as your style. So go ahead, get that piece you've always wanted.
And leave it up to the meticulous eyes of an eBay authenticator to make sure that watch movement is original, that glimmer is real gold, that rare sneaker is legit, or that handbag is really made of genuine leather, and never get faked over again.
In a world full of fakes, it's time to get real with eBay Authenticity Guarantee.
Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about the most powerful commanders in the Lord of the Rings set. We just finished talking about Saruman, and guess who's next? It's Saruman! This time, it's the White Hand.
Not to be confused with the White.
Yeah, it's it's about the hand. He went, I think this is pre-many colors Saruman.
Yeah.
So this Saruman is 1 blue-black red. He's Grixis for a 2/5 avatar wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, amass Orcs X, where X is that spell's mana value. Then goblins and orcs you control have ward 2. We're going to talk about amass real quick. And if you weren't around for War of the Spark, amass orcs says you make a 0/0 orc army creature token and put that many counters on it, or it enters with that many counters, and it gains that creature type. Previously, amass had been written amass 1 or amass 2. It is going to be eroded to be amass zombies 1, amass zombies 2. So it will give the army token that creature type and that many counters. So if you already have like a 3/3 orc army and you amass zombies 2, it'll be a 5/5 orc army zombie.
Yeah. So basically you can only have one army at once.
Yes, that too.
You only make a new one if you don't already have one, and then you put those counters on an army you control. If you have changelings, this gets messy. If you don't have changelings, it's nice and simple. Let's keep it nice and simple.
Or not.
Not that it's that simple even in that case.
You could get crazy with this.
Yeah.
But let's talk about amassing, because there is some really sweet cards from War of the Spark that involved amassing, starting with Widespread Brutality. 1 black, red, red for a sorcery. Amass 2. Then the army you've amassed deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature. So if you have a big army token, this cleans up the board and leaves you alone with this giant army of orcs and zombies. You probably will kill Saruman.
But that's okay.
But that's
you should
okay.
be in a position where that's fine.
Right, where you can smack somebody and take out the rest of the board.
Yeah, I think Dreadhorde Invasion is sweet here. This is a card that, usually sees play in more aristocrat situations where you just make the zombie sack the zombie and get a new one. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and amass 1, now amass zombies 1. And then whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. This Saruman, just because it's triggering off every non-creature spell you cast, you're probably going to get to a 6/6 army with relative ease.
Quickly.
And that thing having lifelink, that's just a lot of life total buffer for you. I think that ability is very rarely relevant, but in this deck, the lifelink ability is absolutely coming into play.
Right, that's a huge part of this. There's lots of little zombies that make your zombie tokens better, but the main one we need to talk about in the amass category is a new amass card, and it is Orcish Bowmasters. This is a 2-mana 1/1 orc archer with flash. When it enters the battlefield and whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, and then you amass Orcs 1. This is a 2-drop. What?
Yeah.
With flash?
This card needs its own episode.
It's so
but
good.
That's not this. It's just very good. Yeah.
It's really good.
Flash feels like a crazy out of nowhere buff, but boy is it relevant if you are responding to a massive card draw spell of your opponent.
If they wheel and you flash this in, what happens? You're dealing 21 damage and making a 21/21 army because all of your opponents are drawing 7 cards that aren't their draw step draws. It's dumb. It's very good. It should go in this deck.
It's crazy good. There's, everyone's deck draws extra cards these days. Put it in maybe every deck you have with black in it. That's an overstatement, but in my personal opinion, not by much.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good. Something that we're going to talk about in a second is these armies are going to be very frustrating to block. Because they could grow at any point. So it's impossible to get a lethal block on it unless you have Death Touch. So I do kind of like combat tricks in this deck. If you attack somebody with a 7/7 or an 8/8, they're going to be like, I guess I take 8 because they don't want to throw a real creature in front of your dumb army. So I kind of like running effects like Embercleave or even Tainted Strike. Embercleave is going to instant speed, make your army 6 bigger, and then plus the 1 from Embercleave, and now it has double strike. So you could go from like a 4/4 army that they don't want to block to an 11/11 double striking trample army. That's a huge swing and a ton of damage that they're like, I was taking 4! Tainted Strike is similar. Like you just sort of begrudgingly take the 8 and then you cast Tainted Strike. It turns it into a 9/9 and then a 10/9 with Infect. So you can really surprise somebody with a whole lot of damage.
Yeah, any combat trick, anything instant speed. I mean, giving double strike that's a huge one. Embercleave is an example, but Temur Battle Rage, just stuff like that.
Yeah, it can just be lethal out of nowhere. And it's instant. So you could cast this all at instant speed. You could attack with a 2/2 and then suddenly it's like an 11/11 and you're like, I can't take 11. You just sort of have to chump it or not chump it and cross your fingers.
Yeah.
And the other thing you can do at instant speed is chuck it at somebody with Fling or Kazul's Fury. Like, you know what? This army isn't doing it anymore. I'm going to sacrifice it. So you'll sacrifice the army, throw, an 8 damage at somebody, and then make an additional 2 or 1 army token with your commander in play.
There are also some fun ways just to take advantage of the fact that your army is made of counters.
Yes.
There's Retribution of the Ancients, a 1-mana enchantment, will cost 1 black, that just has an activated ability where you can pay 1 black mana and remove X +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control to give target creature -X/-X until end of turn.
This is such sweet tech. Really, really powerful. I mean, it's 2 black mana. Like, it's black to cast, black to do. And you can, it's repeatable for every non-creature spell you cast.
Yeah, a way to think of it, and it's better than this, is that you can tack on 1 black mana to all of your non-creature spells to make them removal spells for things smaller than their mana value.
That's wild. Very, very powerful in this deck. I also really like All Will Be One. Every time you cast like a 5-drop, you put 5 counters on something and you can shoot 5 damage somewhere. This card has been a win con in many a deck, and it is in this one for sure.
Yeah, and then of course there are ways to, besides flinging, to sort of cash in your army and take advantage of the fact that it is very big. Hopefully it is very big.
Yeah.
Disciple of Bolas, a great way. Just draw that many cards, gain a bunch of life. You've got things like Shadow Heart, draw a bunch of cards.
That's good.
Mask of Griselbrand.
Oh, this card's great.
It seems really good. It is a non-creature spell, so it's growing your army just from the fact of casting it. It's 6 mana total to cast and equip. That is nothing to sneeze at.
But it gives it flying and lifelink.
Yeah, you have a huge flying lifelinking threat, and then when someone finally does deal with it, assuming it dies to get this trigger, you can pay X life to draw X cards, where X is its power. If you even got 1 lifelinking hit with it, you have the life to pay.
Yeah.
Pay it.
Seems great. I mean, especially in a deck that does want these sack outlets like Disciple of Bolas or Shadowheart, or this next one that I loved in this deck was Ob Nixilis the Adversary. It's 1 black-red for a Planeswalker with 3 loyalty, but it has casualty X. This copy isn't legendary and has starting loyalty X, so you can sacrifice a thing with the power X, and you will make 2 copies of Ob Nixilis, the second one having loyalty equal to that power. So you could make an Ob Nixilis with like 11 loyalty counters on it immediately, and his powers are no slouch either. The plus and minus are good, but we're here for the -7. It says target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life, so it just gives you a Griselbrand. It's like 3 mana, sack a thing, draw 7 cards, lose 7 life. It's really, really good in this deck.
Yeah. Now, once again, this seems to be a theme of Saruman. We care about spells with high mana value that you don't have to actually pay the full mana value for. We're talking about the Treasure Cruises, the Dig Through Times, the Blasphemous Acts, which if your army is at least 5 power going into your Blasphemous Act, it gets 9 bigger. It's at least 14/14. It lives. Nothing else lives. Things don't live a Blasphemous Act. So there you are with at least a 14 power creature alone on the board. It's kind of like the Amass one where it deals damage to everything else. But this one you are often just paying 1 mana to do.
Yep. I love these high CMC spells because they make your army so big out of nowhere. Dig Through Time at instant speed. Ugh. Volcanic Salvo is one of my favorite finds. It's 10 red, 12 mana altogether for a sorcery that costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control, hopefully big. It deals 6 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers, but also puts 12 counters on your army token.
Yeah, it's fun to see a card like that get unlocked, you know?
Yeah.
Sort of Grixis Spellslinger cards that care about power. Not a thing that Grixis Spellslinger is known to have in spades.
Yeah, it's and if you get to cop, it's very cool.
Yeah,
a lot of the spells that we talked about before are going to be good. Miracle spells that you can miracle for cheap, and then you get their actual CMC worth of armies.
2-for-1s are good, or more than 2-for-1s. Mnemonic Deluge. You know.
Yep.
You are casting each of those copies. So
as long as it says cast, and then you're good, and you're making that many counters.
Yeah.
We do want a little bit of cost reduction because we do want to cast these huge spells over and over, and it doesn't affect the actual mana value of the spell. Something like a Mind Splice Apparatus is a new one that I've seen put in a lot of work. It's 3 and a blue for an artifact with flash. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put an oil counter on it, and then instants and sorceries you cast cost 1 less to cast for each oil counter on Mind Splice Apparatus. This also puts 4 on it when you cast it.
Yeah, the non-creature spell versus instant and sorcery spell wording on Saruman himself is just great in that a lot of the time you're going to be doing it with big instants and sorceries.
Right.
But a lot of the enablers for that also happen to not be creatures.
I wonder between like something like Mind Splice Apparatus and Vadric, which puts counters on and reduces the casting cost of instants and sorceries, and the counters on the army. I wonder if this deck has a little bit of a proliferate sub-theme to it, because there is a lot of like artifacty counters things. And I kind of like the idea of just putting Flux Channeler in there and making the number tick up and up and up. And you kind of get that extra value out of it as well.
Yeah, especially if you want to do, because we've been talking a lot about the ways to do this with big spells. You can also do this with a lot of little spells if you're just cantripping. And especially with something like Flux Channeler, getting one more counter out of each of your little spells is going to be a lot better than if you're doing Flux Channeler and trying to get, I got 11 counters instead of 10, but that's my one spell this turn.
Right.
It's not quite the same.
Yeah. It takes a little bit of a build around, but it's kind of cool. Also, if you cast infinite spells like we've talked about before, you can get an infinitely big army. That's cool. You can fling
Refer
it.
to those parts.
Yeah.
It's the same
Cast
combos.
infinite spells.
Now you have black to tutor for them.
Now cast Chandra's Ignition and your army kills everybody. We've done it. Mm-hmm. All right, we're moving on to the biggest, the baddest, the man himself. It is Sauron, the Dark Lord. 3 blue, black, red for an avatar horror. He's a 7/6. He has ward, sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature. Ouch. Then it says whenever an opponent casts a spell, amass orcs 1. Ouch. And then it says whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. Okay. Then it says, whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. Why does it keep going?
It does just keep going. It does so much.
He's a real one-man band, this Sauron. He really just does it all on his own. Who needs Saruman?
Yeah, your Sauron deck is almost built around Sauron because you can't help it.
Yeah.
He does so many things that you just gotta have him on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And that does mean that you do want to protect him. And he protects himself pretty well. That ward ability is no joke. It is, slightly less no joke in the context of Lord of the Rings, because there's a lot of ring tempting, and the first ability of the ring makes something legendary. But a lot of the times your commander pod is not going to have that running around. Someone is going to have to sacrifice their commander to get rid of Sauron. Sucks. Now, let's say they tried to do that. Get him. Get him with Malachor Rebirth, Supernatural Stamina, Kaya's Ghost Form. Just any. There are so many at this point.
Yep.
Just 1 mana black instants that say when a creature dies, it comes back tapped.
Yeah, and his one weakness is board wipes, right? So if you can get a little bit of protection from that board wipe, you can also just keep your guy on board. I could absolutely see if Sauron's on the board, you just cast a board wipe just to deal with him. And if you have a way to return it back to the battlefield, you're like, Gah! I sacrificed a huge board to deal with that guy. You could also do that with just reanimation style spells like Reanimate and Animate Dead. You have a 6 mana commander, you have to be prepared for people to interact with it.
Yeah.
I think the most powerful build of Sauron is going to be Aristocrats.
Yeah, that amass is crazy. Every single spell.
Every single spell your opponent casts, you get a 0, like you get another counter on your army. But if you sack it in between, you keep making a 0 drop and keep making a little 1/1 every time an opponent casts a spell.
And you can respond to the amass trigger from your Sauron.
Right.
So you will always be able to do this. They really cannot get around the timing and stop your Aristocrats from going off.
So if this deck is full of sack outlets, I like Viscera Seer and Woe Strider and even Dark Privilege, which is an aura that enchant a creature gets +1/+1 and sacrifice a creature, regenerate enchanted creature. What creature could it be? Probably Sauron. So if you enchant Sauron, you can regenerate him by sacrificing this army token over and over and over again. And it is not hard to find a payoff for creatures dying in Grixis.
No, not at all. Of course, you have Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat. You also have a new card like Mirkwood Bats.
Oh, God.
Which, this doesn't just care about death. You have to sacrifice it. But whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. That is just an all-star in Sauron. It's almost like they were literally made with each other in mind.
That's his bats. Yeah, Mayhem Devil, Goblin Bombardment, all of these things just give you little damage every time your opponent casts a spell, to the point where their life total will get so low that they cannot cast spells anymore. I also like Unhello the Painter in decks like this. It's a blue-black-red for a Death Toucher. He gives the first instant of sorcery you cast each turn casualty 2. So if you let it build up to be a 2-drop, you can cast like a removal spell, and you can sacrifice your army token and get 2 removal spells out of it. It's a sack outlet and a little bit of extra value as well.
Yeah, it's just getting some great incidental stuff. It is, I happened to do the upgrade guide for when that was a card, and it is a deck I thought I would build at the time. It is a card that I keep thinking I will slot into something.
Yeah.
It has not found a home. This feels like a great home for it. It just goes so well because, your opponents are always going to be casting, among all of them, at least 2 spells between when you need to do important instant and sorcery things.
Yeah. The scariest cards in this deck for sure, if you have a sack outlet on the board, are Liliana Dreadhorde general type effects. Whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. Smothering Abomination is another one where it's just like you will keep drawing a card every time your opponent casts a spell. It's a Rhystic Study, but they can't pay for it.
Yeah. If you want to go super brutal, go the Gravepack Dictate of Erebos way.
That is what the baddies do.
Yeah, that is how to get people to not want to play against your Sauron deck anymore.
Yeah, this deck is powerful, and it can be extremely abusive. So be careful what playgroup you take it to.
Yeah, and part of that is it has a lot of card advantage. We've talked a lot about the amassing ability, the tempting and the sort of mini wheel ability, super relevant. Yeah, there are some great cards that tempt you by the ring in this set, which makes sense. It is the premiere and perhaps finale of the mechanic. And Call of the Ring, for which you have the iconic art on your playmat, is perhaps chief among them.
Yeah.
It's a 2-mana enchantment, 1 in a black. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. It just happens every turn. And then when you choose a creature as ring bearer, you can pay 2 life to draw a card. You don't even necessarily need to do that in this situation. Yeah. You're wheeling and drawing 4.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a way to dump your hand, if you can make a lot of mana and get cards out of your hand, you do that as much as possible. Drawing 4 is a huge amount of cards. Having 4 in your hand is a respectable hand size. Yeah, and you can interact with the fact that you're drawing and discarding those cards as well. You have access to Madness cards, Big Game Hunter, Shadowgrange Archfiend, Dark Withering. Just get some board presence, get some removal for cheaper. And then if you really want to go nuts, double the card draw you're getting with Teferi's Ageless Insight, Alhammaret's Archive which both are basically just saying, if you would draw a card, draw 2 instead. Yeah. Which in this case means if you're drawing 4, draw 8 instead. Oh my gosh, it's so backbreaking.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of value on this commander, and it's just sort of a relentless storm, honestly. Those are the most powerful ways to build that. I do think if you want to do something that's a little bit more amass focused, you could do that with this Sauron. A lot of those pieces are going to be similar to what we were talking about with Saruman. So just copy paste.
Yes.
Okay.
A tiny difference, though, I would say.
Yes, that's true.
Is the amassing does count in your opponent's casting spells. Yeah. And there's just one way in particular that I think is fun to make your opponents do that. It's Possibility Storm. Sauron Chaos. Yeah. Possibility Storm is a 5-mana enchantment, 3 red. Whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it, then exiles from the top of their library until they exile a card that shares a type with it. They may play that card without paying its mana cost, and they put the rest on the bottom. So it's basically just every time your opponents want to cast anything, or anytime anyone wants to cast anything, they're getting something else at random, but they're also casting 2 spells because both spells are technically cast even though the first one goes away. So basically your army is growing twice as big, twice as fast, but also the game is in shambles.
Everyone's upset. No one can kill Sauron because they can't resolve a spell. But you're making a growing army. This Sauron is so busted. It's extremely, extremely powerful. And it should be. It's Sauron.
Yeah.
We're going to keep moving, though, to the Balrog, Durin's Bane. This is 5 black-red for an Avatar Demon. It is a 7/5. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrificed this turn. Dangerous. It also says haste. This Balrog Whoa. The Balrog Durin's Bane can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. Then, when the Balrog dies, destroy target artifact or creature an opponent controls. Okay. So it's a 7 mana thing. You can reduce the casting cost by sacrificing stuff. Also, when it dies, you destroy a target or an artifact or a creature. And also, it just can't be blocked except by legendary creatures for some reason. Some of this text may sound familiar because it is similar to a combo all-star, Dargo the Shipwrecker, which is a 7 mana pirate that he costs 2 less to cast for each permanent that's been sacrificed, each artifact or creature that's been sacrificed this turn. So he costs 2 less. There's a few big differences between the Balrog and Dargo, but it isn't quite enough to keep this from being a wacky combo commander. So Dargo reduces by 2, the Balrog reduces by 1, which means he can't pay entirely for his own commander tax. You do have to account for 2 different colors, it's red and black, but the Balrog does count fetch lands because it counts all permanents that were sacrificed this way. It also has a sacrifice payoff built in, where Dargo's just sort of a 7/5 with trample. The Balrog has a dies trigger. And what you players have done with Dargo in the past is very similar to what you can do with the Balrog, which is cast Dargo, sacrifice Dargo for value, use that value to recast Dargo to sack him, and you cast the Dargo infinite times. You can basically do the same thing with Balrog Durin's Bane, but meanwhile, you're destroying every artifact and creature your opponents control.
Yeah. It takes some amount of work to get the engine going.
It does. You have to sacrifice some stuff, which in red and black generally means treasure tokens, but could also mean mana sources that sack themselves. Famously, Jeweled Lotus, Lotus Petal with treasure by another name. I like Reckless Barbarian, which is a 2-drop that sacrifices itself to add 2 red, or Goldhound, which is a treasure for a single red.
Yeah. There's all great options. Jeweled Lotus, you don't need us to tell you that this is a card that can break some things wide open. But just to kind of put it in perspective, if one of your first 2 lands is a fetch land and you have Jeweled Lotus in hand, the Balrog is coming down hasty on turn 2.
Yeah, and it can only be blocked by legendary creatures. So your opponents have to get their commanders into play to block, or they can't block this 7/5 that is hitting hard and fast early. So there could definitely be a turbo ramp deck that is trying to get this thing out on turn 2 and just start attacking, because it only takes 3 hits to take a whole player out.
Yeah, it only takes 3 hits. Their commander might kind of be the only thing they have access to in the early game that can block it. And if their commander can even get out in time to block it, it probably chumps. It probably does not have 5 power if it's coming out on an early enough turn.
Yeah, this thing is a fast deck, and that is not even including the combo route. I think you probably put a lot of the cheap spells that make treasures in them, but also Strike It Rich, which is a single red that just makes a treasure. And like Deadly Dispute that sacrifices a thing, makes a treasure, draws you some cards. Every time you sacrifice something, or every time you have a treasure in play, that makes your commander cost less and produces mana.
Yeah. So then you get him out, and you need to actually be able to combo with him.
Yeah.
At the crux of a lot of these combos is Phyrexian Altar.
Yes.
Because no matter what, to recast him, you are, even if you've handled the generic mana cost by sacrificing enough things, you need the black mana and the red mana to get there. Phyrexian Altar lets you sacrifice the Balrog, get that death trigger, get one of those colors of mana. Pitiless Plunderer is another great way to sort of get the other part of that, and the fact that it's making a treasure which you sacrifice and counts toward sort of paying for the commander tax the next time.
Yeah.
It's just great. Like those are really parts of your engine that are going to make an infinite possible.
Right. The big difference between Dargo is you do need to sacrifice an additional thing in order to pay for the commander tax every single time you cast your commander again. So making a treasure that sacrifices itself. Or if the Balrog dies and it triggers something that makes another creature, that could be sacked to the Phyrexian Altar for the second mana, but also the second sacrifice reduction. So there's a number of creatures that do this. It's Pawn of Ulamog will do it, Ogre to Slumlord, Open the Graves, Sifter of Souls. All of these will just give you an extra body that you can sacrifice to the Phyrexian Altar for that second colored mana and that sacrifice reduction. Things get really crazy with Annex because when you sacrifice the Balrog, you make 2 guys, and now you have infinite satyrs, which also means infinite mana with the Phyrexian altar. But I think the big thing to recognize here that whether you're building the Balrog or you're playing against it is Magda. Because if Magda's in play with 5 treasures, you can sacrifice the 5 treasures. It gives you that initial 5 sacrifices. You go find Phyrexian altar. You put Phyrexian altar into play. Now you have 2 parts of the combo already. So if they have any of the things that I listed, like Annex or Sifter of Souls or Pitiless Plunderer, that player can now cast their commander infinite times, which is wild.
Yeah, and then you just need to turn that into winning, which
right.
There are so many ways to do that. Goblin Bombardment, just any aristocrats, any ETB thing, Purphoros, Great Here, Impact Tremors, anything in that category of when something enters the battlefield or dies, you're damaging your opponents. Every single one of them is going to get the job done because both of those things are happening infinite times.
Right. You also have infinite storm count because you've cast your commander infinite times. You would win with a Grape Shot or a Tendrils of Agony. The funniest way that you could win is with a Flamekin Herald.
This is phenomenal. I think this is one people maybe need read. It's 2 in a red for a 3/2 elemental wizard. Commander spells you cast have Cascade. So, the Balrog, it has a mana value of 7. These days, your commander deck, maybe your curve's topping out at 6. Yeah. And if that is the case, you get to cast literally your entire deck, and you shouldn't have to. You should have one of these other win cons that we've already mentioned in there, such that you won't get to that point.
But you could, and that's fun.
Yeah, I love this card. I've just been trying to throw it in cheap partner decks, so it's like, oh, my commanders also get mana rocks as I cast them, and it's been okay. Yeah. But this just seems wonderful.
A little win more and deeply incredible. There's a ton of payoffs. So those are all payoffs for right now for the turn that you combo. You're like, I'm casting stuff and I'm triggering stuff and I've gone infinite. There are a few cards that do work after the fact. Like a Jeska Thrice Reborn is a planeswalker that enters the battlefield with loyalty equal to the number of times you have cast your commander this turn, which is infinite. It also has an ability that says -X. Jeska deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets. Conveniently, you have 3 opponents. So you can hit their faces for infinite times, even if it's not the same turn you've comboed off.
Yeah. Among cards that care about how many times you've cast your commander, you have that Storm cycle, specifically Fury Storm and Skull Storm in these colors. And I think these cards are good. Even if you didn't infinite combo, this feels like a deck, especially if you're going pretty treasury with it, which feels like the way it's going to go. You may have cast your commander, 5 times in a particularly grindy game. Yeah. Especially if you manage to do a few of those within the same turn. And Fury Storm copying someone else's instant or sorcery that's super impactful 6 times. That's just a cool thing to do. The deck has other ways that just kind of win the game. But if you're not trying to combo, but you're still trying to just cast the Balrog a lot, cards that care about how many times you've cast your commander are just really fun and very powerful includes.
Right. All right, we have one final commander to talk about. He is the final powerful commander in Lord of the Rings. That's not true. He is of the top 10 that we picked specifically. It's Tom Bombadil. It's Tom Bombadillo, whose boots are not made of yellow. They just are yellow. All right. Tom Bombadil has been out for a while, but if you haven't seen him, he is Wooburg to cast, 5 mana, all of the colors. He's a god bard that's a 4/4. As long as there are 4 or more lore counters among sagas you control, Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. Whenever the final chapter of an ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, saga, 5 color sagas.
Yeah, you have access to all of them, and some of them are just good. There are some sagas that just get a lot of value, do powerful things. One of the new ones that just seems great, especially in Commander, is a Scroll of Isildur. It's 2 in a blue. The first chapter is gain control of up to 1 target artifact for as long as you control Scroll of Isildur. The ring tempts you. The ring tempting is pretty incidental here, but stealing a mana rock early in the game, this is a 3-drop. that's a pretty big swing in your favor. Second chapter, tap up to 2 target creatures, put a stun counter on each of them. Cool. Chapter 3, draw a card for each tapped creature target opponent controls. It's at least 2 because you stunned them.
Right.
But if someone happened to do a big attack, maybe not thinking about it, maybe not caring, you are going to draw possibly a lot of cards with that third chapter ability.
We are also going to talk about this in a second, but this deck is designed to manipulate counters. It has proliferation effects. It has removing counter effects. So you can keep this saga on the battlefield for a long time and hold on to that artifact, and you can proliferate those stun counters. There is a ton of actual synergy with the pieces of Scroll of Isildur. A lot of the sagas that are good in this deck you have seen before: Showdown of the Scalds, Binding of the Old Gods, Binding the Old Gods.
There's no of.
And
Did you know that?
Hate
Did
it.
you get that right?
Have
you
you
also been
searched
saying it wrong every time?
forever and can never find it on Scryfall despite it knowing it's a card? Okay. A lot of these are going to be familiar, but there's also a new saga that's called the Bath Song. It's fun. It's good. You should play it in this deck. It's 3 and a blue, and the first and second chapters are draw 2 cards and then discard a card. Great card advantage. Then it says shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library, add blue. This is particularly good. You can take the sagas that have sacrificed themselves, shuffle them back into your deck so that Tom can find them and put them back on the battlefield. If you want.
Yeah, no, it's very nice. And also, shout out to a random other card, not relevant for Tom Bombadil. If you want to see some hobbits singing the Bath Song, go find the Lord of the Rings Commander reprint of Harmonize.
It's so cute.
Editors, throw that up. It's adorable.
So this deck can definitely be dirtily. So I want to talk about the sagas that close the game out. The ones when you hit them, you're like, all right, we're going now. And the first one is definitely Kioribas, the Sea God. This card is incredible. It comes in, it makes an 8/8. It like sleeps your opponent's stuff forever, and then it steals a thing. Is that even the right order? Sure is. And you can keep redoing that. So if you keep removing counters from Kioribas, the Sea God, you can keep sleeping their board. You can keep making 8/8s. It's a threat in a box.
Yeah, the Akroan War, 3 and a red, you steal something, but the second chapter is until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able. They can attack you. It's not goad, but, with Tom, Hexproof and Indestructible, with you having stolen something, forcing your opponents to attack each other, one of my favorite ways to win, certainly a valid way to win. And then the third mode, each tapped creature they had to attack, they're tapped, deals damage to itself equal to its power.
Really strong. You force them all into war and then punish them for it. It's not nice. But in the meantime, you're just holding on to this creature you've gained control of, and you can manipulate the counters so you keep control of the Akroan War. There's a lot of really powerful sagas also in 40k. I would say probably the best one is the Horus Heresy. It's 3 blue, black, red. The first chapter says, for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target non-legendary creature that player controls for as long as the Horus Heresy remains on the battlefield. Whoa. Then it says, draw a card for each creature you control but don't own. We've done that a few times. Then it says, starting with you, each player chooses a creature. Destroy each creature chosen this way. So you take all their stuff and then force them to pick something to murder. It's not nice. Neither is the 40k world, but it's a very, very powerful saga that can swing the game in your favor.
Yeah, there are a lot of powerful sagas. Pick your favorite. They are going to shine here.
Yep.
And of course, all sagas are enchantments. It's an enchantress deck, or at least it very much can be. All of your classics are good here. Eidolon of Blossoms to draw a card. Setessan Champion to draw cards.
Neshan Wanderer ramps you lands, I believe. Yeah, you look and you put them into your hand. It draws cards. Archon of Sun's Grace is also a great constellation. Whenever a saga, in this case, enters the battlefield, you make a Pegasus.
Yeah, you know what an Enchantress shell looks like. And you have access to all 5 colors. So it really is sort of a pick your favorites situation. Or if you want to go powerful, pick the strongest.
Yep. If you want to be picky, Constellation is better than cast triggers because a lot of these are going to be entering the battlefield off of Tom's ability. So you want ETB triggers rather than cast.
Yeah. And then the thing you want to do is you really kind of want to manipulate Bombadil's ability.
Yeah.
Sort of a notable thing about it, it cares when the last ability resolves. It does not care whether the saga goes to the graveyard. And if you remove a lore counter from a saga in response to the third ability, you get to keep it.
Yep. So
but you also get to go find one.
Yeah, so you get to eat your cake and keep it too. Is that the way it goes? You know what it is.
Yeah.
Clock Spinning is going to be one of the better cards in this deck. It's blue for an instant with buyback 3, and it says choose a counter on target permanent or suspended card. Remove that counter from that permanent or put another counter on it.
You can accelerate or decelerate or save your saga.
At instant speed, and you can do it multiple times.
Yeah, there are a few other ways to sort of save your sagas, get a second use of a mode. You've got Hex Parasite, Thrall Parasite. This is a parasitic thing to do, apparently. Glissa Sunslayer, relatively new card, 1 in a Golgari, so 3 total for a 3/3 Phyrexian zombie elf. First strike and death touch, they're not going to block it. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose one. You can draw a card and lose a life, destroy an enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. You can just reset your saga,
yep.
Use it all over again. Then, of course, those are some good ways, and there are a few more. You can flicker sagas to sort of save them, but you can also time when they go off. Normally they're all going to happen on your turn, so Tom Bombadil saying, do this only once each turn. Even if you have a lot of sagas ready to go off at the same time, they're synced up on lore counters, you're just going to get one. But if you can add counters at instant speed to have them go off on your opponent's turn, that's another way to manipulate Bombadil's ability. And, there's a lot of ways to do that proliferate.
It's going to be the most efficient, specifically ways to proliferate at instant speed. Evolution Sage is landfall proliferate. Flux Channeler is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. There's a lot of ways that they added in All Will Be One, and many of them are going to be very, very powerful. And remember, you don't have to proliferate everything. If you just want this saga to go off now, you proliferate 1 counter, it can go off, and then next turn, it'll be set for 1 thing to go off. I bet this deck is a nightmare to pilot. I think it's very, very difficult.
Very difficult to pilot. It's a lot of decision making, assuming you're doing well and in a good position.
Right.
But if you have a few ways to instant speed proliferate, deciding, okay, which one goes off now? Do I want more than 2 to go off because they're powerful abilities, even though that means I'm missing out on a potential Bombadil sort of cascade, proverbially, into another saga? There's a lot to keep track of. There's some other crazy sort of counter manipulation. Just a fun one to bring up because she is so tied to Bombadil in the lore, is Goldberry River Daughter, 1 in a blue for a 1/3 legendary nymph. You can tap her to move a counter of each kind not on Goldberry from another permanent you control onto Goldberry. And then you can pay a blue and tap her to move 1 or more counters from Goldberry onto another target permanent you control. And if you do that one, you draw a card.
Seems super good with lore counters, which don't make a difference whether they're on Goldberry or not, but you can take things off of one to slow one down and or accelerate another one on a slightly different turn and draw a card. Plus, they're coupled up. For those who don't know, Goldberry and Tom Bombadil are bows. Is that even right? I don't know. It's fine.
They're cohabitating.
They're buds.
Yeah, they're cohabitating, and they are vaguely described.
Yeah.
They're visually well described.
Oh my gosh.
Goldberry was actually the character, because we were doing a lot of sort of looking at these cards and comparing them to the books, and boy, does Goldberry's art match exactly how she is described in the books. It's remarkably impressive. It's
also just stunning. Like, it's the kind of card that you look at, along with the Galadriel that we talked about earlier in this episode. This is Marie Magny's art. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say her last name. But it's just, I was scrolling and stopped on the art on Goldberry. It's beautiful. All right, that's it. We've talked about the 10 most powerful Lord of the Rings commanders as far as we're concerned. But we're going to get into our favorites, and then we're going to talk about the most powerful of all. Let's start with favorites. What's your favorite out of these 10?
Boy, did I think my favorite was going to be Lord of the Nazgûl, but then as we talked about it, Galadriel, just that scry landfall situation. I just really like when a commander takes a mechanic that isn't necessarily even a deck and makes it a deck. And the way that Galadriel and some of the other elves in the set, but I think she's definitely the strongest of them, takes Scry and makes it such a build around from the command zone. You get to do such cool things. You get to go so big with it.
You get to run Mystic Speculation. That card's awesome.
Yeah, just looking at the list of cards, if you showed me those cards and told me there's a commander that makes this list good, I would say, show me that commander immediately. And they did, and they printed it.
Yeah. I agree. I think that one's great. And you know what? I had my favorite written as Éowyn Fearless Knight. And I still love this card, and the art is unbelievable. And the more we talked about it, the more I was like, I got to turn Ratchet into Gandalf, because this Gandalf the White is so fun. And it really was what I wanted out of the Elish Norn card, where it's like, I'm not really into a card that stops my opponents, but this Gandalf card escalates your deck and gives you that flash speed tricksiness that I love. It's so fun.
So impactful, so fun.
It's really fun. So I think I got to do a rebuild of one of my decks as Gandalf. All right, we've talked about the 10 most powerful in the set, but what do you think is the most powerful of that 10?
So my pick is Sauron the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
Which may sound a little cliche. But, he is not one of the ones that we talked about with infinite combos. And obviously infinite combos just make a commander very powerful when it can pull them off easily. But a lot of them tend to be fragile, especially once your play group or once the meta knows that's what that commander is doing. Whereas Sauron, it's pure value and it's a ton of it. Every one of his abilities is super relevant. And it's just, if he is on the battlefield, he himself is such a presence,
right,
and so impactful on the game that just feels like the most powerful commander to me. Do other commanders that we talked about maybe have a more powerful deck? Perhaps, but I think just sort of taking average power level and not relying on combos that can be disrupted, Sauron is putting in a ton of work.
I can't argue with that, and it feels right, that the biggest bad, the baddie of them all is like, when he's on the battlefield, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like that everyone is rallying together to get rid of this nightmare. Because it is rough. I think the commander that I am most afraid of in the command zone, which is often how I answer this question, is Aragorn the Uniter. For all of the infinite combo reasons, but also just because of the mystery around it, where it's like, you're gonna have to tell me exactly what's gonna go down before I can really judge what's happening. And I think that mystery and that capacity to be really powerful is the kind of deck that I am the most cautious about.
Yeah, that's true. Those commanders that kind of force the pilot to say, oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
It's not the worst.
Yeah.
Tend to be the ones that you have to worry the most about.
Yeah.
That's why they're saying it.
Right.
Whereas I think anyone who's playing Sauron is going to say, you should worry. I'm playing Sauron. They're playing here to, they want to be that guy.
Right. And you can be prepared for that guy.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I will bring my powerful deck and we can go to battle, Sauron. All right, to the listeners, which commanders do you think are the 10 most powerful commanders in this set? Are you planning on building any of the ones that we talked about? What hot pieces of tech did we miss, or are you most excited about that we talked about today? We talked about a lot. This episode is long. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. This set is so exciting and full of cards that I am picking up, and I do so at cardkingdom.com/command because I know that I can trust them to put all of the cards that I'm looking for in the correct printing, in the correct foiling, in the correct condition into a single box, and it'll arrive safe on my doorstep all at the same time. If I'm getting excited about a deck, I want it to show up on my doorstep so I can start playing right away. And having just one envelope that I'm keeping track of and one day that I get to grab and rip open a bunch of cards and build a new deck out of is the most exciting way for me to shop for singles. But you can also pick up all of the sealed product. There's a ton of sealed product for this set, and it's all confusing, and you have no idea where any of these cards are coming from. So do your research. And buy exactly the products that are going to scratch your Lord of the Rings itch at cardkingdom.com/command. You can also support the show by going to ultrapro.com/command and sleeving up all of those sweet new Lord of the Rings cards that you have purchased. Buying the playmats that they come upon, this foily, creepy Frodo And
This just straight up handsome Aragorn.
that handsome man on a horse. There's a lot of handsome man on a horse playmats, actually. The new Éowyn art is super sick and is also on a playmat. Make sure you're going to ultrapro.com/command to get all of the Lord of the Rings art that we are ogling over. And it also supports the show if you use ultrapro.com/command to do so. Okay, we're going to say thank you to the team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Damon Lentz, Arthur Meadowcroft, Lady Danger, Manson Lung, Craig Blanchett, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Jordan Pridgeon, Sam Waldo, Grav Galati, Mitch Trafford, Evan Limburger, Gabriel Poses, Megan Yep, Eric Lem, Jimmy Wong, and Josh Lee Kwai. Also, thank you to Jamie Black for taking the time and going through this super long episode with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, this set is a joy to talk about.
Yeah,
it's going to be a joy to play with. This was a blast.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time as coverage continues for Lord of the Rings.
So long.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.